My entitled family demands that I allow my sister to move into my house after she apparently fell on hard times. And despite the fact that I said no and that they are awful people, they simply refuse to listen to my reasoning, forcing me to get the police involved just to get them away from my home. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I'm currently living with my husband in a 2-floor house in the suburbs that is big enough for the both of us and also to host lots of guests if needed. 7 years ago when I was 25, I lost my one and only soulmate, my best friend. She was my world and my rock, and everything made sense around her. I could talk about her all day, but that would take too long to write down, and I would probably break down in tears anyways. After she passed away due to a horrible freak accident, I fell into a depression that led me to drinking away my feelings. And this completely altered my life for the worse. I lost my apartment, my friends, my family, and my life. I had absolutely no one, and my parents were so ashamed of me that they refused to let me live with them. And my sister, well, she claimed that she was living in an apartment that was way too small and that she just couldn't house me. So I ended up being homeless and desperate for a long time. 6 years later and a million rehabilitation meetings later, and I am now fully sober with a kid on the way. I never kept contact with my family after what happened, and instead I focused on myself and I met the love of my life. Well, fast forward to a month ago, and my sister found my new number through an old friend and contacted me asking if she could stay at my house for a while. Apparently she had lost her job and had been going through a tough divorce and lost her house as well. Well, obviously I refused, reminding her of how she treated me in the past. Well, last week my parents and my sister somehow found my address and they came to my house demanding to let my sister stay here. My sister defended her past actions by revealing that she found out she was pregnant after my best friend passed away, but apparently never wanted to tell me due to the fact that I was grieving. She also didn't want me to stay at her place because she was scared that I would somehow push her into also being an alcoholic and somehow harm her kid. She then said that her situation is different now because she already has kids that her ex-husband has custody of and that she wants to get her life together and she needs my help. Well, after a long discussion, things were getting heated and I had to eventually call the police. I'm now thinking of filing a restraining order against them, but my husband is telling me to just let go of my rage and help my family out. I honestly don't know what to do, and I already feel super stressed out while also being pregnant, and I have hormones jumping out of my ears. So that may also be the reason for me being extra angry. I need someone's opinion on this situation who doesn't know me, and I'm hoping for some kind of advice because right now I really don't know what to do. Dude, this is some crazy behavior. You mean to tell me that these people rejected you at your lowest point, but somehow they're gonna show up and be like, you need to let your sister in. She needs to live with you right now. This is what family does. And it's like, yeah, this is what family does. You guys literally turned your back on me, and now suddenly I'm supposed to be the better person? Like, what are we talking about here? If the sister really needs a place to stay, then stay with your parents. Why are you coming to my doorstep? And in my opinion, it's kind of alarming that your husband is not on your side with this one, because this is just some stupid behavior. He does know that these people abandoned you when you had nothing, right? Like, they literally allowed you to sink to your lowest point in your life, and they still want to try and be like, oh, it's your turn to help us out. But it's like, wait a second, when did you ever help me out? So honestly, your whole family is super entitled, and the fact that they're trying to throw this on your shoulders is completely toxic. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for snapping at my roommate for leaving her dog home when she literally sleeps at her boyfriend's house all the time? Because right now I'm kind of getting sick of having to take care of this dog, and at this point I'm honestly super frustrated. Here's what's going on. To start things out, I live with my best friend who we will call Molly for the sake of the story. I work from home and Molly works in an office. Molly has a dog by the name of Gabby, and Molly is not the best dog mom if I'm being completely honest. She walks her maybe 1 to 2 times a day, and the walks are anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes long. That's it. That's all the stimulation this poor dog gets. Now, I secretly walk her extra times because I feel bad, but I don't want my friend to know about that. Anyways, Gabby is historically terrified of thunderstorms. She will whine, she will pace the house, and she will be very loud, scratching at the walls and doors and all this other stuff. Molly's been dating a guy for about 8 months, and it's getting pretty serious. She stays at his house anywhere between 2 to 4 nights a week, so Molly will come home from work, walk Gabby for a few minutes, and then immediately leave again for the night. She literally never brings Gabby to the boyfriend's house. Now, we live in a rainforest climate, and it's been raining here every single day and night for 2 weeks and counting now. So when Molly goes to her boyfriend's house for the night, she fully knows how Gabby is going to act, but she leaves her here anyways for me to inevitably deal with. I finally confronted my friend about this, and her response was to lock her in my bathroom. She'll be fine. And it's like, what are you talking about? I'm not locking this dog anywhere, and I think this whole thing is really messed up in general. I finally snapped at Molly about this, and we haven't spoken in a few days. We avoid each other like the plague, and Molly is too selfish to apologize. So seriously, am I the jerk here? Should I have just kept my mouth shut? Or was I right to say something and be justified to be fed up and pissed off? What should I do? Okay, you had every right to say something here. You are definitely not the jerk. Molly's a terrible dog owner, like seriously. She's literally leaving this dog for you and just not even like considering the fact that, hey, maybe you don't want to deal with this. Which basically means that Gabby is slowly becoming your dog instead of Molly's. And if she really cared about this dog, she would take the dog with her to her boyfriend's house. She basically lives there anyways, like what's going on right now? So I know if I was in your shoes, I would be very pissed off. Because there is no way I should ever be expected to have any kind of like responsibility over this dumb dog. And I'm right there with the original poster. I'm never gonna lock a dog in a bathroom just because my roommate is lazy and doesn't want to take care of their animal. That's just incredibly cruel and something that you should absolutely not have to deal with. Am I the jerk for refusing to help my sister with her baby every single day after work? Literally because I just don't have time to make that kind of commitment. Here's what's going on. I'm a 21-year-old female and I work full-time every single day except for Sundays. My sister recently had a baby who is now 5 months old. I love my nephews and I visit them whenever I can after work, but it's usually a long trip and I get home at around 9 o'clock when I go there. I live with my mom and she doesn't like me taking showers after 9 o'clock because of the noise. Even though I pay the water and electric bills, I try to avoid fights and respect that. My sister just returned from maternity leave and asked me to come help with the baby every day after work so that she can shower and get things done. I told her that it's difficult for me because of how late I get home and the problems it causes at home. I also mentioned that I'm usually exhausted after work and that going there daily would be way too much. Well, she said that it was fine, but then got really upset and started yelling at me. She brought up personal things, saying that I can't keep a job and making me feel like I'm unreliable. Now, I was just trying to explain my situation, but she seemed to take it as some kind of attack. And now I don't feel comfortable going to her house anymore, even though I care about her and the baby. She has a husband and in-laws who could help her out as well, so I don't feel like it's fair for her to expect this much from me. So seriously, am I the jerk right now? Because honestly, I'm not sure how to take this. No, this is really weird behavior in my opinion. I don't think you're the jerk at all. I think your sister's overwhelmed and she's taking this out on you, which is absolutely not fair. Because think about it for a second. She has a husband and all these other people who absolutely can help out. So if anyone should be stepping in to like take care of the baby, it should be your husband, not you. Like, come on, man. You should not be expected to come over every single day to take care of her child. That is not how this is going to work. And also, it doesn't mean you're selfish or uncaring. It means you have your own life and your life doesn't revolve around her baby. So no, you're definitely not the jerk here because what your sister's asking of you is kind of overboard. Am I the jerk for calling my stepdad out for his awful behavior towards me? Because my mom is literally doing nothing about this and instead trying to say that I'm the one being rude, despite the fact that this guy is constantly messing with me. Here's what's going on. For a bit of context, I'm an 18-year-old female and I've never gotten along with my stepdad. We've barely gotten along since my biological dad passed away and my mom has been married to this guy since 2020. Recently, my stepdad has been causing more issues with me. I asked him to shut the door because I was holding two dogs. I had my puppy between my legs and I was holding my mom's 150-pound St. Bernard with his collar so they wouldn't run outside. But he just looked at me and rudely said, "Calm down," when I literally asked him nicely to shut the door. Then the next day, which was yesterday, I came home with ice cream. Now this is ice cream I had bought myself as a treat to reward myself because I've been cutting wheat out of my diet. Well, as soon as I walked into the kitchen, he expected me to share my ice cream. He said to me, "You brought home goodies and you won't even share?" Meanwhile, he had his own ice cream in the freezer, along with many desserts on the counter. Also, I spent my own money on this ice cream, so I didn't feel the reason to share it with him. I went to my mom because I was annoyed, and she was in the kitchen when it happened. She then told me that I've been rude to him lately, when I haven't been rude to him at all, and any of my rude behavior was me calling him out for being rude to me. She then told me how I need to treat him better and stop being rude to him. Well, today, I walked inside after my mom told me that a package came for us. My stepdad then brought the box inside and decided to open the box so I could get my stuff. He looked at me and said, "That's mine," even though he knew the box had stuff for me and my mom in it. My mom told him that he could go through her stuff and take anything he wanted, but to not take any of my stuff. So I decided to text my mom and I complained once again about his behavior because his words were unnecessary, but instead she said that I was being rude. My last straw was when I found him in my snack drawer. I have my own drawer of snacks as I avoid wheat due to having a wheat allergy, and my snacks are gluten-free, and I'm the only one in the house who has any reason to eat gluten-free snacks. So I called him out, as my mom had told him multiple times to stay away from my snacks, and that snacks for everyone else are in the drawer below. So am I the jerk for calling out my stepdad? Because right now I'm incredibly frustrated. No, your stepdad sounds super annoying, and it it seems like he's doing this on purpose just to try and get under your skin. And yes, your stepdad is a problem, but also the fact that your mom is not doing anything about this, that in my opinion is an even bigger problem. It shows that she does not give a flying crap about your experience in that household. And that's a huge red flag. Like, that really sucks. Like, this guy's got it out for you and your mom is just letting it happen. She's just saying, oh, you have to be the one to change. You're being so rude to him. And it's like, no, that's not what's going on, lady. You know for a fact he is screwing with you. So no, you're not the jerk for calling him out, because honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would do the exact same thing. Am I the jerk for giving my sister an allowance every month without telling my mom about it, all because I love my sister and I want to help her out? Because after my mom found out about this, she went ballistic, saying that because I'm doing this for my sister, she claims that I'm implying that she's a bad mom, leaving me in a situation where I worry I might have made a mistake. Here's what's happening. Okay, so my little sister, who we will call Ellie, has an intellectual disability. She's independent for the most part, but needs assistance for things like finances. She works but has a maximum she can earn due to her benefit situation that I simply won't be getting into here. So because of that, she has extremely little leftover money each month. And by extremely little, I mean next to none. If she does have a little extra $10, she uses it to buy things for her cat. Ellie is incredibly thoughtful and kind as a human being. Well, my husband and I have a little extra money each month, and we decided we would give some of that to Ellie so that she can have a little bit of fun. We give the money to her in the form of a gift card, usually to her grocery store, a coffee shop, or something else that she likes to go to and do, like the movies or something like that. Unfortunately, we don't live close to each other, so we can't take her to do these things in person. We chose to do this without telling our parents because we are all adults, and we confirmed it wouldn't impact her benefit situation at all. And this has, as of now, been going on for about 8 months now. However, my mom found out about this somehow and went ballistic. She called to say that she was extremely insulted we would go behind her back to be a parent for Ellie. She said we were implying that she was a bad mom, that we had no right to involve ourselves in Ellie's financial life. We were shocked to say the least and tried to explain it was just a little bit of money. We're talking maybe $100 at most each month. And we did this because we love Ellie, not because we're trying to undermine her. And for the record, my mom is not very healthily involved in Ellie's life. She does help with some logistical needs around her benefits, but my dad does most of the work, and my mom doesn't support her financially at all. She obviously loves Ellie, but since they also live far apart, she's a bit less involved than my dad. So seriously, am I the jerk for this? Is my mom justified for being pissed off? What should I do? No, you're not the jerk. I can tell you exactly why your mom's pissed off. She's mad because you're stepping up in a way that she isn't. Because right now she's projecting how she feels about herself onto you. She's trying to be like, oh, you think I'm a terrible mother and all this other crap, but it's like, no, you're saying it yourself. You're a terrible mom and you know it, and you could be more involved, but you're not. And that, in my opinion, is like the most revealing thing about this entire scenario. She could be doing more, but she's not, and the fact that you are makes her feel inferior, which hopefully will prompt some kind of change, but in my opinion, it probably won't. So no, you're not the jerk, and I think your mom is just being overdramatic. Am I overreacting for snapping at my best friend for inviting my awful ex-boyfriend to her wedding simply because he's a part of the friend group? Because right now, I'm seriously considering stepping away from this wedding and not being a part of it at all because of this. Here's what's going on. So my best friend is getting married in 2 months and asked me to be a bridesmaid. We've known each other since college, and at first I was very excited. That is, until she sent me the guest list and I saw my ex's name on it. This man emotionally mistreated me for 2 years. Gaslighting, public humiliation, cheating, the works. And she was there for all of it. She saw me crying on her couch countless times. We haven't been together for 4 years, but the trauma is still fresh sometimes. When I asked her why he was invited, she said to me, well, he's part of our friend group, and it would be weird if he wasn't there. Don't worry, you won't even have to talk to him. I told her that I couldn't believe she was prioritizing social convenience over my emotional safety. She then said I was making it about me and that weddings aren't the time for grudges. So I straight up told her that I wouldn't feel comfortable attending, let alone standing beside her. She then told me I was overreacting and that I was ruining her vibe. I haven't replied since, as I do kind of feel heartbroken over the friendship entirely. So seriously, am I overreacting for sitting this one out, or am I justified in any kind of way? Because right now I'm incredibly devastated. No, you're not the jerk, and you're definitely not overreacting. This guy literally mistreats you for years, and your friend saw this, and she still is like, oh, let's not hold a grudge. It'd be weird if he wasn't here. Let's not worry about that stuff right now. It's my wedding. Like, dude, what are you talking about? This is some some crazy behavior. Like, this lady does not sound like a friend at all. And just like someone said in the comment section of this post, luckily you found out right now, because my God, this is a huge red flag. She would happily bring along your ex-boyfriend instead of listening to you and in some way like prioritizing your safety. So no, you're not overreacting, and I know if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. Would I be the jerk if I called the city on my neighbors after they parked their RV in the back alley that has effectively blocked me from parking pretty much anywhere near my house? Because after their rude attitude and condescending demeanor, I'm honestly considering doing this because right now I don't know what else to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, my neighbors have always parked their work truck in the back alley by their garage. I am completely fine with this, even though sometimes it gets too close to my back entrance. However, they have now parked their detached RV in the back alley, and it is clearly blocking not only the back entrance, but it's just a little off to the entrance of my own double garage. Needless to say, it has been challenging parking my car that is on the side where their RV is parked, as I only have the opposite side of the back alley to angle my car to go in and out. They've parked their RV there for more than a month now, and so I finally cracked and I went to talk to them about it. I got one of the couple to answer the door, and I asked how long they were planning to park their RV in the back. Well, her response, although she did sound a bit annoyed, is that they will park there for a couple more days. And then she completely stopped the conversation by shutting her doors before I can say anything else. And so now, since I'm a little bit frustrated with her response, and in all honesty, just by the way she acted, I'm wondering if I would be the jerk by calling the city about their parking job. And as a side note, you definitely cannot park your RV in the back alley at all, meaning that I would be in the right for complaining about these people. Okay, first of all, no, you would not be the jerk if you complained about these people, because their attitude is what would really piss me off. If they slammed the door in my face after they're like, oh, we'll be there for a few more days, and then didn't explain anything further, like, holy crap, I would go to the furthest extent possible to make sure these people get in trouble. I would take pictures, I would take videos, I would show that yes, they're blocking my alleyway access, and they're literally preventing me from parking my car. So no, you would not be the jerk, especially with their attitude, because if they want to be toxic, then guess what? You can and should absolutely return the favor. Am I the jerk for asking my sister not to make jokes about kissing my fiance? Because after she did that during a July 4th party, it made things so awkward that I couldn't help but say something later in private, causing a massive argument between the two of us that's still going on today. Here's what happened. Okay, so my fiance and I have been together for about 3 years now, and recently he finally proposed. He has always been a family friend and was best friends with my sister for a while before we got together. My sister is the way we met, and I will always be grateful for that. However, recently I was back home to visit my parents, and my sister came along as well. When the party died down, I was with my fiance, my sister, and another close family friend from home in my parents' basement. My sister sat in between me and my fiance, which I didn't mind because they are very close friends. However, she made a joke saying, "What if I made out with your fiance right now?" When she said this, I was shocked, but I didn't want to speak up right then and cause a fight in front of our friend. So I just said to her, "Oh, that would be crazy, so please don't do that." I then later approached my sister about it, and I asked why she would say that and that it's a bit weird to be talking about kissing my fiance. She then said that I was overreacting and that it was all jokes, going on about how I need to understand that this is just how she jokes with him. I understand they have been friends for a long time, but it made me very uncomfortable when she made that joke. I talked to my fiance and he said that he also thought it was weird of her to say that, but now I'm fighting with my sister about this almost every single day. So am I the jerk for starting a fight about this with her? Because right now I'm not sure what to do. No, you're not the jerk at all. This is weird behavior. I don't care who you are. Saying you're gonna make out with your sibling's fiance is not a good move. And if anything, that's a big red flag. Like seriously, this is messed up. And I can only imagine how uncomfortable that was for your fiance. If I was sitting there with my fiance and their sister was like, "Ooh, I can make out with you right now," I would stand up and be like, "What is going on right now? This is weird." Like, just think if the roles were reversed. This would be a horrifying situation. So why does your sister get off on saying that and think it's okay? So no, you're definitely not the jerk for calling her out about this because she is absolutely in the wrong. That is a weird comment to make that is absolutely unacceptable. Am I the jerk for not refunding pet sitting money immediately after the job was canceled overnight while I was attending a funeral abroad? Because right now I don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I was hired to pet sit for someone for about 2.5 weeks. I committed to the job, I kept her consistently updated, and I even booked my flight around the exact dates that she gave me. Everything was planned and I started the job as agreed. I was paid on the first day of pet sitting, and I had already begun caring for the pets when I received devastating news. A very close family member, someone who was like a mother to me, had passed away unexpectedly. I let the pet owners know right away, I kept her in the loop, and I arranged for full coverage for the days I would be away. I used the last of my savings to buy a last-minute international flight to attend the funeral with every intention of returning after 5 days to complete the job. Well, after I landed in another country, she canceled the job. No prior warning, despite all my communication and all my planning. Now, she's demanding that I return the money she sent me immediately. And while I haven't refused, I just explained that I got back very late last night and I'm still grieving. I'm emotionally exhausted and financially drained. I need some time to get back on my feet. It feels like I'm being treated as if I flaked out or that I tried to take advantage, but I was doing everything I could to fulfill the job. I worked the first part, I communicated the entire time, and she canceled on me after I made huge sacrifices to follow through. So am I the jerk for not being able to pay her back immediately under these circumstances? Because right now I don't know what to do. Okay, I've got to be completely honest with you. Yes, I absolutely think the original poster is the jerk. You did not fulfill your side of the agreement with this job. And yes, I understand you had a family member pass away, but at that point you left the job and you tried to ship it off to someone else, and I'm sure the owners of the pets were like, no, this is not going to work. So they absolutely should have canceled the job right then and there. So guess what? If they cancel the job, then that means you can't keep the money. You've got to give it back as explained. I don't care how emotionally drained or exhausted you are. They paid you for a service that you didn't provide. So yes, overall, I absolutely think that you definitely are the jerk.
I broke 2 of Karen's bones when I ran her over, because she tried to stop me from saving a life. I worked in an ER for 6 years, so I'm full of stories, but when it comes to entitled people, this one sticks out in my memory. Every person who's worked in the ER knows that Mondays are the busiest days of the week and also when all the crazies come out. This day was no different. I worked as a nurse in triage, where you initially get assessed in the front before going to the back. Here we determine who needs to go back first and who can wait. We had a few stretchers in the front for people who needed to be monitored a little closer or needed IVs, blood draws, labs. There were 6 stretchers, but this day was so busy that all 6 of them were filled, plus 5 more were in the hallway. So this one lady comes in on an ambulance, but because her symptoms didn't indicate an emergency, she was put in stretcher triage to wait her turn. She was in a lot of pain. After assessment, I recognized her symptoms as being caused from gallstones. Painful, but in this case not life-threatening. We put her on a stretcher, started an IV, drew labs, and hooked her up to the monitor just in case. A few minutes later, her daughter comes in the front door. One look at her and I knew she had caused problems. She had everything from the shoes to the haircut. A classic rich Karen. When she saw that her mum was still in the front and hadn't seen a doctor yet, she started screaming that she knew the CEO of the hospital and we'd all be fired if we didn't get her mum back to see a doctor right now. We explained that her mum has a history of gallstones, and even the patient herself was saying that she's had this pain many times because of the gallstones. We explained about being really busy and that there were no rooms available in the back and we'd get to her as soon as we could. She eventually calmed down, but she was still antsy. About an hour later, and another patient came in and was put in the stretcher besides the patient and her entitled Karen daughter. This patient had worrying complaints, but on initial assessment we couldn't find anything wrong. Now, as a nurse, you learn to always trust your gut. When your gut sounds an alarm, you listen. Something about this patient was setting off my alarm bells, but all his vitals were normal and I had no solid evidence to declare him an emergency. I hooked him up to the monitor and kept a very close eye on him. I let the charge nurse know of my concerns and she said to let her know as soon as something changed. Not even 5 minutes later, something changed. Now, at this time, I could explain that this hospital was a level 1 trauma center, meaning we get all the bad cases from car crashes to gunshot victims. Since we had to be ready for any traumas or life-threatening injuries, we had a room with 3 beds that was closed off from the rest of the beds because traumas usually involved a lot of people and a lot of blood. Even on busy days like this one, those rooms were empty unless there was a trauma patient. Now, back to this new patient. I was taking the vital signs of gallstone lady when I looked over to the new guy. I noticed a worrying change in his heart rhythm and stopped with gallstones to start assessing the new guy to see what was going on. This did not sit well with entitled daughter. She actually grabbed my arm and told me to finish with her mum. I jerked my arm free and said I had to make sure the critical patient was okay. As I turned around to critical patient, his rhythm went into VFib, or a life-threatening rhythm. With VFib, you literally have less than a minute for life-saving interventions. I called the charge nurse to inform her of critical patient's condition, all while unhooking him from the monitor and throwing his bed into drive. As I started pushing him back into the trauma room, the Karen actually jumps in front of the stretcher and stops it. She was screaming that her mum was here first and needed to be seen before the critical guy, and screaming that I was a liar and that she was going to get me fired. I'm usually a mildly tempered person, but knowing that this guy was literally seconds from dying, I said to the young Karen, "You have a choice. Get out of my way or get run over," as I started pushing the stretcher forward. Now, I'm really good at pushing stretchers fast and getting the patients where they need to go in a hurry, which is one of the reasons I was part of the trauma team. She tried to stand firm, but then she saw that I wasn't going to stop and jumped out of the way just as I was an inch from hitting her. Unfortunately, she didn't move fast enough, and I ended up running over her foot, which I found out later broke 2 bones. At this point, I didn't care and got the patient back to the trauma room, leaving her screaming on the floor. We spent about 30 minutes on this guy, but he ended up dying. By the time I got back up to the front, this patient and her entitled daughter had been taken to the back to see a doctor, but my charge nurse warned me that they were filing a complaint against me. A few days later, the actual CEO of the hospital came to visit me on my next shift. He was known to be a kind and fair man. Since this happened during a time before cameras were put in the ERs, he had to take what happened from word of mouth. Apparently, Karen said that I assaulted her several times and put her mum's life in danger by not assessing her properly, and that I should be fired. It turns out her mum did have gallstones and nothing else. I calmly explained exactly what happened and that Karen's actions might have ended up with the critical patient dying because of the delay she caused with her actions. When I got to the part of what I said to the daughter and running over her foot, the CEO actually started laughing and then tried to cover his mouth to hide his laughter. He explained that this lady was a friend of his sister and he knows what kind of person she is. Not only did I not get fired, he put a personal note in my file praising my actions. On my next review, I got a large raise and a bonus thanks to the CEO's note. As a side note, the hospital gives an award twice a year to 2 employees that exhibit excellent skills in their profession. In my review, they informed me I won this award because of the CEO's note. It came with a $500 bonus. A lot of people have wondered why this lady wasn't charged with the crime. I'm not sure. It happened 20 years ago and I was 22. So I didn't know anything about legal options. I just went on with my day and didn't think of turning her in. We found out later from the autopsy that the critical patient had an abdominal aortic aneurysm, which has a very high mortality rate, and probably would have died no matter what we or the daughter did. You know what? I think working on this channel is having an effect on my empathy for a certain type of person, because I actively fist-pumped when I read about the daughter's foot getting crushed under the wheel. I guess once someone is labeled as a Karen, it automatically removes a part of their humanity and my sympathy for them. That unfortunate loss of my innocence aside, honestly this might be the greatest physical consequence ever meted out on this sort of person that I've read about in my time making these videos. She absolutely deserved something for standing in the way of a patient in critical condition, and while I'm sure she didn't quite understand what was going on fully, lady, this is a hospital. You have to let the nurses and doctors do their job. Lives are at stake all the time, and your mum's gallstones aren't going anywhere. The fact that the author's boss reacted the way he did about it suggests that this kind of behavior was pretty common in Karen. And in their limited time together, she had been enough of a pain in his butt that hearing about her being actually crippled and presumably having to be put in a cast made him burst out laughing at her. If that's how people who know you react when you break bones, either you have the world's worst friends, or you might be the world's worst one. Well, rest in peace, critical patient, and author, you did do the right thing. Sell me alcohol illegally. I was working in a small chain corner store about a 5-minute walk away from my house. I don't live in an unsafe area per se, but it's not really the kind of place you could leave your bike out in front of your house either. Basically, people will steal, and the people who smoke green herb don't even try to hide it despite the illegality of it. So I got to see a whole lot of not-so-nice people, including a regular who we'll call the entitled woman. This woman would just come in to buy cans of alcohol and scratch cards. Once she even called me and my manager the C-word because we wouldn't let her in past closing time. What did she want to buy that one time? Tobacco. That's it, just some tobacco. She was becoming so threatening that my manager had no choice but to let her in and serve her. My manager at the time was a tiny woman, and I was just an anxiety-ridden 19-year-old. I have no doubt that she would have waited for us to come out and then done something incredibly violent. Entitled woman was unhinged. But this was a different story. On Sundays, we weren't allowed to sell any booze after 10 due to the limitations on the license the store held. Every other day was fine, just not Sunday. I'm from the UK, by the way, and it's pretty much the same across the board for all shops. Not only would I have faced charges, but that silly woman would never have been able to pop in to get another bottle of wine again. But yeah, we'd never had a problem with this other than some people rolling their eyes, but I never had any arguments. Until one evening at around 10:45 p.m., the entitled woman comes in and tries to buy a bottle of wine. I told her that we couldn't serve alcohol, expecting her just to sigh and put it back, but oh no. She was adamant that I'd just made this rule up out of the blue to spite her. She said, I've bought alcohol from here at this time before. Other people serve me. Obviously, I was a little shocked at this point, but I went on to reiterate why. I explained the alcohol rules, but she still argues. Apparently, she does buy alcohol this late on Sundays all the time. And this is a lie, I always work Sunday evenings, and I've never served her that late. She started to get livid and demanded that I call the manager. I do just that, and of course my manager says the same thing. At this point, we have a line, and I'm getting angry. The store closes in 15 minutes, and I still have to do a quick clean, and we have to count the cash in the tills, but this woman is holding up everything. I said, I can't serve you the alcohol. If I scan it through the till, then it will be saved on our system that I sold it illegally. I could get fined, fired, and it'd be on my record for the rest of my life. Oh, fine. I'll leave the money here and you can scan it through in the morning. I have enough money. My manager and I are just gobsmacked. She really thought that she could just bypass the law like that? It was honestly ridiculous. Luckily, it didn't take long for her to get the memo and leave, but she did leave in a huff. She didn't shout or scream, but I did hear her mutter, "For frick's sake," as she left. I just can't believe the entitlement of this woman. I was only 19 at the time, and she wanted me to risk my job and get a criminal record just so she could have a bloody bottle of wine? She even came in the next day when I wasn't working and never apologized to my manager about the horrible way she acted. And yes, it was definitely safer for my manager to just try and get her to leave. If she had called the cops and started something dramatic, I feel like this woman would have gone out of her way to find out where we live. I'm so glad I don't work in that place anymore. The author and the narrator have a vastly different opinion on what constitutes a safe neighborhood. If the local store has regulars who are willing to hunt you down and exact vengeance on you for not being able to get their bottle of hooch, I'm not sure that you live in a safe neighborhood, but maybe that's just me. To call this lady a jerk feels a little mild if you're scared for your health while you're dealing with her. You're definitely not in the wrong for not wanting to get a massive mark on your permanent record for the rest of your life. Being a scared teen in a job full of rough sorts earns you my sympathy. So, all in all, probably a good thing that you got out of that job in the long run. And I don't envy any of your managers in having to be in charge of it when people like this lady came in. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I won't come into your store anymore, but no one else will either. A couple of years back, I brought my wife flowers for Valentine's Day from a national florist that had affiliate shops all throughout the country. So the flowers get delivered and they look like complete garbage. The arrangement was smaller than advertised, and the flowers were a few days from fresh and they were wilting. Now, in my opinion, it's Valentine's Day, the one day a year a florist needs to be on point. So I called the closest florist shop that was affiliated with the national one to complain. I wanted either a replacement arrangement or a refund so I could go elsewhere to get decent-looking flowers for my wife. The grocery store honestly would have been better. When I called to complain, the person who answered the phone was very rude right from the jump. I have to assume it was a crazy busy day for her, and my arrangement wasn't the only one that had issues. The woman became very defensive, as if the flowers were a part of her soul and I was personally attacking it. I asked to speak to the manager and she replied, "I'm the owner." We continued to argue for the next couple of minutes, and when I threatened to stop payment on my credit card, she said, "All right, I'm going to refund you the money, but you're never allowed to step into my store again," and hung up on me. All right, witch, I got you. So I spent the next few hours on the phone with a national florist, bouncing all over the country from call center to call center, moving one rung up the ladder of their corporate structure at a time, until I get about 4 steps from the top and someone gives me a boost, and I got the actual number of the CEO of the national florist. I spent about 20 minutes on hold after speaking to the secretary and briefly explaining my situation. I told the CEO what happens and he couldn't have been nicer. I told him I had ordered from different national florist stores from many different states in the past and was generally satisfied. And I felt like the local shop in no way represents the national florist brand and they should lose their affiliation. He didn't immediately respond to the request, but said he'd investigate the situation and in the meantime send me some flowers from a different florist locally within the national florist brand. I received those flowers from a florist an hour away within 2 hours and they looked amazing. Better than I could have asked for. About 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. And the letter apologized profusely and thanked me for bringing this to their attention. Apparently, they keep tapes of the calls made to the florists, they reviewed the tapes, and agreed that the local florist didn't represent how the national florist wants to treat its customers, and the local florist will no longer be a part of the national florist brand. He gave me a $250 gift card to buy from any national florist store. Within 2 years, that local florist closed because it couldn't support being an independent florist in this suburb, when there was already another florist under the national florist brand. So, sure, lady, I won't step foot in your store again, but neither will anyone else. So, am I the jerk? Well, as much as I bemoan the loss of small independent businesses, it doesn't sound like this local shop was doing much to help themselves out. The fact that you wanted to speak to the manager is making my alarm bells ring after so many Karen stories, but honestly it sounds like, unlike the many grim tales we do hear, you had a valid complaint and you're at least capable of empathizing that the bad state of your bouquet might have been down to her intense business at that time of year. You tried giving them the benefit of the doubt and they didn't deal with it well. Also, the owner's warning to never step foot in the shop again is a bit darn funny, given that she'd have no means to recognize you after the phone call. Hopefully, the florist found her true calling, because it's clear that it lay neither in customer service nor floral arrangements. Oh, you're close with the boss? Well, I am too. Sometime between 2000 and 2002, my dad and a friend of his started a company. They put in the grueling and overwhelming amount of work necessary to have it grow exponentially over the last 20 years. A couple of years ago, they had an opening for a technical editor, and my dad offered me the position. I'd just like to say that I'm so unbelievably grateful for this, and I always will be, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I have to tread lightly sometimes. Every year during the holiday season, they, like most businesses, throw a holiday party. They have several around the country, so every office has one, but the main one is where corporate is headquartered. The first year I attended the party, nobody knew who I was. I tend to not share who I'm related to for obvious reasons, unless somebody asks. It's not a secret by any means, but it's not something I shout from the rooftops. Anyways, the bar opened an hour before the party technically started, and since it's an open bar, a few people were already quite a few drinks in. I went up to get a drink, and somebody who I've never met before introduced himself to me in a pretty rude and arrogant way. I'm talking, "You probably know who I am, but if you don't, you should. I'm Howard." He was clearly pretty hammered, but it's a party and I didn't blame him for that. I shook his hand and tried to walk away, but he wouldn't stop talking about how important he was to the company. I smiled and nodded and oh'd and awed for a while, even as he spilled his drinks on me from gesturing wildly. Eventually he told me, "I'm also really close to the president." This interested me quite a bit because that was my dad and I'd literally never heard this person's name before. Not a problem though because I didn't know all his friends, but he kept going on. And here's how that conversation went. "Yeah, you could pretty much call us all family friends, I suppose." "Oh really? You know his family?" "Oh yes, of course. We've all gotten together a few times. His kids love me." "Wow, that's pretty cool." I wasn't planning on saying anything because he was drunk and it didn't really matter to me. However, then he turns and says, "Okay, well, I have more interesting people to talk to now," and walked away. I was livid. First of all, you spilt your crappy, dirty martinis all over me, so I smelled like olives. Then you were kind of a jerk from the get-go, and you wasted 30 minutes bragging about yourself, and then you tell me I'm uninteresting. Right. So I waited until the perfect moment when the party had started to taper off a bit. Our homebody Howard was still there, even more drunk than he was before. He eventually made his way over to my dad and mum, chatting them up and whatnot. I sidle over to the group and he gives me the stink eye, probably thinking I'm trying to cozy up to them too. The look of horror on his face when my dad hugs and kisses me on the cheek and says, "Hey honey, your brother's coming to pick us up. Do you need a ride?" was indescribable. It was a combination of, "I think I just crapped my pants," and "I'm going to yeet myself out of this window immediately." It was genuinely one of the best small revenges of my life. In case anyone wonders, he and I laugh about the incident now, and it's not a big deal. It's a funny story that I like to tell. Howard ended up reaching out and apologizing a few weeks later. I give him huge props for it because I'm sure it was difficult to swallow his pride. That last part is interesting to the narrator. Strange that his ego grew so damn exponentially when he was drinking, but he was capable of reaching out personally to say sorry. When to be honest, most people would have just hidden away or denied. So good for Howard. I wonder what his drunk logic was at the party. Faking a connection to his colleague until he made it? Strange. Well, Howie, you were an honorary jerk for one night, but you made it out clean on the other side. Hopefully that side of you is just a boozy thing and not your real personality emerging. Rich Karen demands a discount because her kid might have a terminal illness. So I'm in my early 20s and I work part-time retail at a beauty supply store to supplement my disability income. I just went through a 9-month-long battle with a very aggressive form of leukemia, which for anyone who isn't familiar with it is a blood disease, and in 2013 this included daily infusions of arsenic and chemotherapy, and even though there isn't a cure, it can be controlled with oral chemos now that I'm past the first year. But I will be weakened and immune-compromised for many years, if not the rest of my life, and I'll probably have to be on these medicines for the rest of my life as well. Earlier today I had a lady come in, and just by the look of her and how she acted, you could tell she was going to be self-entitled and somewhat rude at best. She was overly tan with bleach blonde hair, super long bright pink acrylics, Chanel bag, and drove a Mercedes. She goes directly for our selection of hair extensions and browses for a few minutes. She was talking loudly on her cell phone the whole time and didn't even acknowledge my greeting as she entered the store. She then starts snapping her fingers at me to get my attention. Snapping her fingers like I'm a dog. I guess she couldn't be bothered to tear herself away from her riveting conversation about why her friend's co-worker's boyfriend was having lunch with another woman to speak to me like, an actual human. I walk over to her and politely ask what she needs help with. She wants me to unlock all of our hair products so she can browse as she likes. We keep it locked because a lot of it is over $100 and it's a high theft item. I told her I wasn't allowed to do that, but if there was any color she wanted to look at, I'd be happy to unlock it for her. And also we have a ring full of full-length swatches that she's welcome to look at as well. Of course, she starts huffing and giving me dirty looks, like how dare I tell her no as per our company policy, don't I know who her husband is? But eventually she settles on one of our priciest sets of 100% human hair clip-ins. Before I ring her up, I let her know that all of our hair is absolutely not returnable or exchangeable for any reason once she walks out the door. She says, fine, and I ring her up and tell her the final price plus tax, which is close to $200. And she goes ballistic. But my daughter may have a terminal illness. The virus with the big C, just so you know, we can't say the name of it on YouTube. So I should get a discount. So you're buying extensions for your daughter because she might have the big C? No, they're for me, but it's very stressful having a sick child, and the terminal illness will be very expensive to treat if she has it. Like what? So I say, Mom, I'm very aware of how expensive that illness is, but we don't offer an illness discount. If you've ever had a loved one with that disease, you'd understand. I'm a really easygoing person, and usually I let things like this not affect me in the slightest. Heck, I love making jokes about my illness, but I hate it when people use other people's illnesses to gain sympathy and benefit. My mother had a really tough time dealing with my illness, so I have some idea how truly heartbreaking it can be to have a sick child. So I say, I have that illness, Mom, so I know what it's like and how devastating this kind of illness can be on the body and mind. All 4 of my grandparents died of it, and my stepmother is battling the chest variant of it for the third time, and it's metastatized to her lungs, lymph nodes, and brain, and they're giving her less than 2 years. So yes, I know how it feels. If I were to give a discount, it would be to the people fighting it, not the people trying to gain my sympathies. Silence and a stunned look from her. I say, "Your total is $200, would you like a bag?" And then she was very sweet for the 2 minutes it took her to pay and leave. In short, my kid might have a disease, so discounts on items to make myself look good through my grieving period, maybe. Wait, your kid's getting a terminal illness might get you discounts on stuff you buy for yourself? Man, I'm gonna shave my kid's head the first chance I get. Sorry, terrible tasteless joke from the narrator aside. My good gracious me, way to shoot down a Karen. She clearly had a lot going on in her life, and no matter how nasty the person, no one deserves to have their child get sick like that or even think that they might. But come on, it's a bit of a leap to expect a 20% discount on everything in life because of that unfortunate event. At least she had the grace to simmer the F down once you one-upped her like that. I'm not sure I've ever heard of someone with that unfortunate a medical history as the author before. If I had things that tough, I'm not sure I could deal with someone like the lady in question, even from the first snap of the fingers. And let's linger on that particular part for a second. As awful as a lot of these people are to serve and work with in general, is there any greater indicator of just how absolutely terrible a ride you're in for as when they call the service over by clicking their damn digits like that? I'm getting angry just thinking about it. Anyway, you were uniquely placed in that moment to bring her royal crappiness crashing down, and thank you, for all of us, for seizing the opportunity. Although I hope her daughter got better. Karen crashed into my Jeep and expects me to pay her cash for her damages because her children will apparently starve if she pays to fix her car. So some backstory, I own a Jeep. Fully built, lift kit, ADD bumpers, the whole shebang. So one day I'm coming home from work, and it's a sunny day, the roof is off, and I'm having some open-top fun. I stop at a red light and suddenly, bang! I drive forward slightly and go back to assess the damage, and lo and behold, it's a Mercedes C-Class, a new one at that as well. Completely destroyed from the front, and my beautiful Jeep had no damage apart from a few scratches. I went to check on the passenger of the Mercedes. I got them out, and luckily she was unharmed. These mercs are definitely safe. Under a minute after she's out of the car, she starts screaming about how I wrecked her car. I told her calmly that she was the one who rammed into me. I think she understood how my hitting her would be impossible. I offered to share our insurance details because I knew that Mercedes damage doesn't come cheap. But she said she doesn't have insurance. She insisted that I pay her $10,000 cash, and how she got this number, I don't know. I said that was just plain wrong as, 1, she hit me, and 2, it's her fault for not having insurance. She then went on a ramble about how her kids needed the money and they had no money at the time, and now her kids will have to starve because she'll have to pay to fix her car, and how it will all be my fault when they're on the street tomorrow. Yeah, on the street with a Mercedes, my butt. That's why you should have insurance. But no, she said she'd call the cops if I didn't pay her. I refused as this was just dumb, so then she called the cops. Yeah. Cops came and assessed the damage and asked us what happened. She said, and I quote, "He backed into me at full speed on a red light." My fricking god. Then they asked me what happened and I told them, and it became a he said, she said situation. Luckily, a shopkeeper was there and saw the whole thing and even captured it on a surveillance camera. Needless to say, I came out on top. Cops got her for reckless driving and driving without insurance. She then started yelling at the cops about how they would just let a criminal get away. They explained that I did nothing wrong and they had video evidence now. The partner of the cop came to me and told me if I could drive, I could leave. So I got in my Jeep and left. Never want to have a Karen experience again. Not worth it. In case you were wondering, if you have a lifted Jeep with heavy-duty bumpers, a Mercedes can't do much damage. Okay, update. So Karen read my post. Who knew? I certainly didn't think it would happen. I just received a direct message from Karen in all caps, as you'd expect. She basically said how I already destroyed her car and left her penniless, and her children were starving. I'm so over that bit, by the way. And now she wants me to take down the post because it defaces her. She said, and I quote, "You know this is illegal, right? You have no right to talk like this about me. You already wrecked my car that I have to pay out of pocket now for. If you don't take this down immediately, I'll report you and sue you for attacking me." I explained to her that neither was her real name mentioned, nor did I mention the place where this happened. The only thing mentioned was her car, and now she was being a big jerk. But no, she threatened to sue me for defacing her beautiful reputation. How? So yeah, that happened. I advised her against this, but she said she had my license plate number, and if this post isn't gone by tomorrow, I'll be receiving some papers. I'm not worried at all. She doesn't have a case, as I didn't mention her name or any revealing info at all. But if there's anything I missed that can cause me problems, please let me know, as I really don't want to take a wrong step. P.S. For all the ones asking, yes, the Jeep Wrangler and I are fine. It was built to take the punishment, and so was I. In short, Karen crashed into me, wrecked her car, and had no insurance and wanted me to pay $10,000 in cash. Cops came and ticketed her, and I left. Well, the Karen was already spitting a fury about being on a basically anonymous post on Reddit, and now she's on YouTube. Hi, Karen. Enjoy. Honestly, though, she has no real legal legs to stand on in terms of defacing and defamation, right? Unless her first and last names are actually Karen, in which case I kinda get why she's so angry all the time. I mean, me slandering her and her ilk all the time can't be easy. But back to the case at hand. Not only is she a massive jerk, she's also completely detached from reality. Unless she's right, and whenever someone wrongs us, we can just up and ask for an arbitrary amount of money to fix the damages. You heard it here first, folks. Get out there and start collecting. Don't do that. Also, Karen, if your kids are starving, what are you trawling the internet for stories of yourself and driving an uninsured Mercedes around for? I know from your behavior that you haven't worked a dog-darn day in your life. Maybe it's time to start. Because I'm thinking your current methods of income generation, i.e. made-up legal charges policed, argued, and collected by yourself, don't seem to be working out. I'd wager if you just get up and start telling your stories at an open mic from your perspective, people might think it was the greatest ironic act ever. Give it a try, earn some cash. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Prankster workmate doesn't like it when the joke is on him. Years ago, when I was a youngster just starting to make my way in the adult world, I took a job at a machine shop. Since I was the new guy and a lot younger than the rest of the crew, I had to put up with a lot of practical jokes as a kind of initiation hazing. It was all in good fun, mostly, so I went along with the jokes, knowing that the guys would give it up after a while. I was right, and after a few weeks when the others realized that I was a decent sort and they could rely on me to hold up my end of the work, they eased up on the teasing. All of them, that is, except for one guy. He was the shop jerk and a resident troublemaker. And while most people got along with him, no one really liked him. This fellow was as bald as an egg without a single hair on his head. And because we were such an intellectual group, he was given the nickname Baldy. When the rest of the fellows quit their teasing of me, Baldy redoubled his efforts and his pranks took on a mean-spirited quality. Tools I needed would go missing, or he would accidentally bump the emergency stop on machines I operated, causing me to have to reset and reload the job. It got to the point where his behavior was degrading the quality of my work, and every time I called him on it, he just told me to do something about it, trying to provoke a confrontation. So I did something about it. I figured the best way to deal with this guy was to turn the tables on him, give him a taste of his own medicine, and make him look foolish in front of the other employees. This was an industrial setting, so everyone wore the usual protective gear. Hard hats, gloves, safety glasses, the works. At break time, Baldy was in the habit of putting his gear in his toolbox, topping the pile with his upside-down hard hat. When we broke for lunch, I filed out to the break room with the rest of the crew, then doubled back into the shop through another door. I went straight to Baldy's workstation and filled the bottom of his white hard hat with at least an inch of similarly colored half-and-half coffee creamer. I double-checked that at a casual glance in the hat it wouldn't raise suspicions. Then I rejoined my fellows and had a very nice lunch. Break time over, we all went back to the shop. I hid around a corner, giggling, as Baldy geared up to start work, He picked up his hard hat and plopped it on his head. As he did so, all that half and half ran down his safety glasses and over his face in thick, sticky streams of goo, making him look like the guest of honor at a very adult-themed party. He stood there sputtering and cursing at the top of his lungs while the rest of the crew gathered around him laughing and shouting encouragement. Baldy always hated me after that, but never messed with me again. And no one called him Baldy anymore either. He'd always hated that nickname, but I think he would have readily gone back to it if he could, because his new nickname among the crew was Money Shot. Oosh. Well, he had that coming. Honestly, don't dish it out if you can't take it, folks. I'm glad for the author's sake that this didn't escalate afterwards. It seemed like they judged it really well and it actually solved their problem. Money Shot seemed like a real pain in the hole, and in my experience, people love seeing those put in their place. So, a reminder of his place in the social pecking order below even the new guy, while mean, is probably what he needed. Ease up on that behavior, Money Shot, be nicer to your workmates, and eventually you'll move up the line and make friends. Until then, enjoy your nickname. Have fun explaining it to every new hire from then on in. Or maybe embrace it, and take some shots to the face from your colleagues to make some friends. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. Entitled mother decides to mess with a service dog team. A bit of backstory here. I have a service dog named Nova. She's trained to let me know when someone is approaching me from behind, as well as distract me from self-destructive behavior, like picking at my skin and scratching myself when anxious due to my PTSD and other mental health issues. While it's not required in the US, she does wear a vest that states service dog. So we were at Walmart a while back, picking up a few groceries after work. Usually this goes pretty well as a lot of the workers know Nova and we only do small trips at a time when we don't have someone with us. The Walmart manager has met Nova and I on several occasions and is generally helpful with anything we need to make our experience better. Now that we have our scene, let's go. We first spotted the wild Karen and her spawn down the aisle and didn't think much about it. We were just getting a few things for dinner and for the next couple of days, since I didn't have to work and didn't plan on making an extra trip. Then this conversation occurred. The brat runs up to me and yells, "Mommy, a dog!" staring at Nova intensely. "Yeah, I see." Karen continued shopping and texting on her phone. The brat runs towards Nova and starts petting her. So I said, "Hey, can you please not do that? She's a service dog and she's working." The kid continues petting Nova. I put the dog behind me and say, "Please don't do that." Then comes the voice. "Why can't he pet the dog?" Still not looking away from her phone. She's a service dog, she's working. It could be very dangerous if she gets distracted. The kid starts pushing against me to get to the dog. "Stop that. Go bug your mother." "Just let him pet the dog. He's not hurting anyone." "Lady, control your kid. I said he couldn't pet her and explained why." "Well, if your dog can't be petted, it shouldn't be in public." The brat returns to his mother crying, and I continue deciding which frozen pizza to buy. An employee sees this commotion and comes over to talk to me. "Hey there, is there anything I can help you and Nova find today?" No, we're just picking up a few things for the next couple of days." Nova sat down and stared at the employee. He looks at me and I nod. He then gives Nova a quick pet. "Hi Nova, being a good girl?" We then hear the voice of you-know-who. "Why is he allowed to pet your dog but my son can't?" "He's a dear friend and also he asked permission. Your son did not. Please leave me alone." She went rambling on about how she was going to get the employee fired and call the cops on me for discrimination. The employee says, "Would you like me to page the manager for you?" "No, it's okay. I only have a few more things to get." We continued chatting as we moved down the aisle and into the next before he got back to work. Now I was a few aisles over and I just had to get some peanut butter. I thought we were going to make it without any further problems, until this happened. The brat came running full force at Nova and I from behind. Nova let me know there was someone behind me. I turned around to see the kid running and he grabs Nova's vest and rips it in a few spots before tripping and crying as he hits the floor, screaming for his mother. She emerges around the corner like the angel of death, glaring daggers at me while I check on her kid. "How dare you push my child?" Making a huge scene and begins screaming for help. The Walmart manager finally arrives after being paged by employees as I was waiting. He says to me, "Hi, how are you and Nova? What can I help you with?" Karen screams, "She pushed my son!" The Walmart manager listens to her side of the story about how I refused to let her son pet my dog and pushed him because I don't like kids. And then he explains how that doesn't sound like me before asking her to leave and having the other employee escort her out. He then apologizes and even offered to accompany Nova and I while we finished shopping, and I politely decline. As we're leaving after finishing up the shopping, the entitled mother is seen arguing with police officers because she doesn't want to leave the store. I hope she got what she deserved and pulls her head out of her butt and raises her son to learn some manners and self-control. In short, entitled mother and son are at Walmart and don't respect boundaries. Claim I discriminated against them and pushed the son because I wouldn't let him pet my service dog. The mum says that service dogs are there to be petted or they shouldn't be in public. After they get asked to leave, the mum is seen arguing with the police. Service dogs aren't there for your enjoyment. They're trying to do their jobs. Well, 3 out of 4 of our stories today are not just Karens, but Karens just so clearly detached from reality that every single one of them invented reasons why their wrongdoers should lose money or get arrested. In this case, finding another random customer at Walmart for discrimination, because they won't let your kid pet your dog. What human being has enough time on their hands that it would be worth getting the police involved, even if you weren't just clearly making these charges up? Is she just trying to intimidate people with empty threats? Or does she genuinely believe that these are things that they can enforce on society? And the second part is just so weird to me. The kid relents and then decides to come charging back for a sneak attack? What's going on here? Did she put him up to it? If the other Karens have taught me anything, it's that they don't know when to quit and are completely justified in everything they do, somehow. I hope the store had security footage for when she inevitably tried to come after the lady for supposedly shoving her kid. Then she can get some more collective judgment when everyone watches her little darling sprint up and rip the vest off a service dog. Scam caller won't stop calling me, so I find a clever way to shut him down. Here's my encounter with a crappy telemarketing company. I cut some details because this could have been twice as long. Names are changed as well. Let me start by saying that I get a crap ton of calls from card services. Screw those guys. This story has nothing to do with them. I like to mess with scammers, so I often take their calls and string them along for my own amusement. I know it probably makes them call me more, but it's the burden I bear to supply my hobby. A couple of days ago, I got a call from a bullcrap company wanting to extend my car warranty. The company has a name on file with my phone number, and they think I'm Mr. Jones. I am not Mr. Jones, I'm his son. I guess technically I am Mr. Jones, but not the one they think I am? Let me get on with it. The agent runs through her spiel for a couple of minutes, and I plainly say, I'm not Mr. Jones. To this, she replies, "Ugh, why didn't you tell me at the beginning of the call?" And she hangs up. What a B-word. Now at this point, I assumed the number was fake. But since they sounded American, I call it back. Even though the number was in my area code, it rings straight into their system. And I'm greeted with, "Hello, Mr. Jones, can you verify the make and model of your vehicle?" I replied that I'm calling to report that an agent just hung up on me. Then the next person hung up on me. Fricking jerks. So I began calling back. A lot. They're clearly frustrated. This one grumpy jerk answers, and to throw him off guard on an unrelated topic, I ask, "Are you voting for Trump in 2020? And he replies, "Heck yeah, I am. Well, you're going to be on Brokeback Mountain," or some dumb homophobic crap. You know, the usual stuff a Trump supporter would say, and he hangs up. I call back and get grumpy fricker again, and he's clearly frustrated. He asks if I don't have anything better to do, to which I reply, no. At this point, he informs me that I'll be placed on a permanent call list and I'll receive a call daily after hours, to which I reply, don't you have anything better to do? Grumpy fricker tells me he gets paid by the hour so he doesn't give a crap and hangs up. So I call back again. At this point, the seemingly small office staff have recruited the big guns out of a desperate frustration to end my calls and sell me a gosh darn warranty on a 2003 car with 183,000 miles. Enter Roger. Roger is a salesman. He's as persistent as a motherfricker with his pitch. So I start to accuse Roger of working for a scam company. Roger seems to actually have a passion for this company, and when I ask for a website, he gives me one. To my surprise, they have their services listed on the site, but the name is not the name they're using on calls and the domain is only 2 years old. The domain also has nothing to do with cars or warranties or anything remotely close to what they're offering. I concede to Roger that I believe him when he says they're a legitimate company, albeit a crappy one on par with the ilk of payday lenders, and we reach a point of mutual respect. Roger is polite with me, so I'm polite with him. Now we're friends. I explain to him my history with scammers and I tell him that the reason I've been calling incessantly is because one of his agents hung up on me. Roger isn't pleased and he says he thinks he knows who she is and he'll talk to her. Goodbye, Roger. Have a nice day. Fast forward to 7 p.m. when I'm on the phone with my wife. My phone starts buzzing and I check to see who's calling, and it's a restricted number. I tell my wife I'll call her back. She knows I love messing with scammers, and I take the call. I say hello twice and then hear these words that I'll never forget. Remember me, butthole? Permanent call list. And I proceed to laugh with delight at the absurd notion that Grumpy Fricker has actually followed through with his grand plan of calling me at a mildly inconvenient time. He hangs up. Now, one key detail that Grumpy Fricker is likely unaware of is that I now have a friendly relationship with his manager who seems to actually take pride in his job. I also know the number to his call center because I called it about 1,000,000 times that morning. There was really no need for Grumpy Fricker to use a restricted number. Naturally, the only thing I can do here is to call my new friend Roger and let him know how his employees are spending company time. I call the number and I'm greeted with, "Hello, Mr. Jones, can you verify the make and model of your vehicle?" I ask to speak to Roger. The lady says, "I can help you." So I tell her that one of her associates just called me from a restricted number so he could call me a butthole. She said, "Oh, let me transfer you to Roger." Roger answers and I say, "Hello, Roger. Do you remember me from our talk earlier?" He does, of course, so I tell him that prior to our conversation, Grumpy Fricker put me on the permanent call list. I then describe Grumpy Fricker as an old Grumpy Fricker and ask him if he might know the agent I'm referring to. Roger declines to name names because he doesn't want to single out one of his employees based on their age, and I respect that. I then tell him that Grumpy Fricker in fact just called me from a restricted number so that he could simply call me a butthole. I offer to email Roger the recorded call, but he declines as we've built a respectful relationship based on trust and civility. Roger then interrupts me and says, "Hold on a second, let me look into this." A few minutes later, he gets back on the phone and says the gentleman, Grumpy Fricker, just confirmed my story and that his behavior is unacceptable. He then tells me that Grumpy Fricker will definitely be written up for his behavior as it's quite unacceptable. I reiterate that I thought Roger would be deeply troubled to find out that his employees were behaving this way, as they represent a totally 100% legitimate business enterprise, and this would reflect quite poorly on them. He thanks me for my call and apologizes for the situation. Get fricked, Grumpy Fricker. I hope that was your last write-up. On behalf of all of us, thank you for giving that gentleman what for. I've often been tempted to follow in your footsteps and begin my career as a professional salesman troll, but as you say, doing so can result in them calling you more often. And to be honest, I should be narrating rather than wasting my voice on these guys for 4 hours a day. Continue to block all restricted numbers. But thank you nonetheless, good sir, for wasting these people's time and ensuring that at least some of them are too busy being led in circles by you to have the time to call the rest of us, and potentially annoying them so much until they just go and find another job. Also, it's hilarious that Grumpy Fricker's decision to pay you back for giving them a taste of the call center's own medicine ended up with him being formally disciplined. Roger is the one enigma here. A potentially honest call center manager? I just kinda thought they were all con men. Maybe it's all an act from him and he's not actually disciplining his employees at all. Wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. And I guess Roger benefited from Grumpy not wasting his precious time to annoy the author. Maybe I'm wrong and too cynical, and maybe honest call center managers exist. Who knows? Lie about your rank to an actual higher-up? Enjoy your new neighborhood nickname. Ah, this sweet victory story. Definitely a favorite of mine. When my husband was in the military, we lived in a small and quaint off-post housing neighborhood. We were moving soon as he was medically retiring, and we had a pretty pleasant 3 years in our house. Spirits were great, all things considered, until this little sack of crap moved in down the street. This guy and his friends were car guys. Nothing against that at all, I'm a bit of an enthusiast of heavy machinery myself. but not during quiet hours when my child is asleep, and not when it involves literally sawing a car in half. Yep, sparks are flying and all. To say the noise was concussive at 10:30 at night is putting it gently. So naturally, my husband starts getting a bit irritated with the cacophony. I must admit, so am I. We aren't that old yet, but certainly in the adult mind frame to know when to shut the frick up for the day. I'd just gotten home from work and my irritation paled in comparison to his. He eventually decides to confront our dearest neighbors as tactfully and politely as possible. He begins the walk to their house. It's about 30 seconds into this that I can hear yelling growing continuously louder, echoing throughout the usually sleepy street. I can see the two mechanic aficionados puffing out their chests and getting closer and closer to my man. He's very calmly standing there, arms folded in front of his chest, slowly nodding. The conversation reaches an ebb, a resounding, "What's your rank?" from the mechanic. A calm response from my husband, inaudible from this distance. Mechanic A fires back with, "Oh yeah? I'm a staff sergeant too, B-word. I pay the rent here and I can do what the frick I want. Get the frick off my property!" My husband, now laughing, returned home and said Mechanic A had called the military police. He said he'd wait outside and flag them down before they got there and asked to go talk to the mechanics with them. They arrived about 2 minutes later and briefly chatted with my husband. They went to the house and began their assessment. It didn't even last 5 minutes before they left and my husband came back, laughing even harder. Apparently, the guy that screamed at him was not a sergeant, but a specialist in supply that had had a few too many beers and decided to build a Frankenstein's monster-esque contraption in his carport. I mean, welding and beer go hand in hand, 10 out of 10, right? The military police cracked up as they walked back to their car with my hubby and sided with him. And to sweeten the deal, he was the soldier of one of my husband's friends. He very easily could have gotten into far worse trouble for his ego. From that point on, he was referred to as Lord High Speed by his co-workers. Peace returned to our street. He never sawed another car in half again. Look, I've been barely tangentially involved in the armed forces, and even I, a rank amateur, know that you don't start playing the rank game aggressively if you don't know what the frick rank the person you're talking to is. And if they are a rank above you, only bad things can happen to you if you decide to go on the offensive like this. Also, you're getting drunk and operating heavy machinery like this, so there's a very good chance that the person you're bluffing to is going to recognize that you aren't the sort of guy who gets entrusted with any sort of meaningful military rank. Older ranked people who know and like each other talk about these sorts of idiots, and you can guarantee that unless this guy's overseer really liked him, he was going to be that bit more tough on his discipline going forward. What a moron. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. After my ex did something unforgivable to me, I left him stranded in a foreign country and told his mum on him. Decades ago, I was backpacking through Europe with a friend, a former boyfriend. The trip started off great, but a couple of weeks in, we were in an overnight sleeping car on the train. While the other passengers from our room were in the dining car, he tried to commit the unspeakable act on me. At first, I thought he was joking, but he wouldn't stop no matter what I did or said. I fought and begged him to stop. He kept telling me I knew I wanted it. He only stopped when the other passengers came in. I was in too much shock and disbelief to say or do anything afterwards. I was in a foreign country, all alone except for him. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. I doubted myself. Was I overreacting? We checked into a hostel and left all of our belongings in a locker. Important detail. When we went into the town to explore, I timidly brought up the previous night. He gaslit me so hard, he almost had me believing it was me who committed the unspeakable act against him. I snuck back to the hostel. I told them we weren't staying there after all and got a full cash refund. For his spot, too. They were fully booked and our 2 spots were snatched up before I even left the lobby. I took our stuff out of the locker and left his pack sitting unsecured. I took all of our shared supplies such as food, guidebooks, and the Thomas Cook train schedule book. This was before the internet. Trust me when I say the book was vital and expensive. I hopped the next train to the opposite end of Europe. Before I did, I made a quick international call to his mother, telling her what he'd done. Worth every penny. I wish I could have seen his face when he realized I wasn't coming back from the ladies' room, and later when he had nowhere to stay that night, no food, and no idea when the next train was. And then when he talked to his very angry mother. The one thing I didn't do was take his passport. The hostel was holding them, and they tried to give his to me when I checked us out. But I only took things that belonged at least in part to me. Why stoop to his level? Last I heard, karma hadn't caught up with him. But maybe he learned something from it all and changed his ways. Yeah, right. But I can choose to think that if I want. Yeah, I'm sorry, there isn't enough karma in the world to pay that guy back. There are a couple of moral crimes that'll make you dead to this particular narrator, and the one he attempted is one of them. As far as I'm concerned, if he tried to do something like that, he deserved to have his passport stolen as well. He probably wouldn't die or anything, he'd just have to spend a long amount of time in an embassy, getting himself sorted and having to spend a ton of money more than he had planned to get home. He deserved worse. Thank God he wasn't successful in his attempts. She broke my heart? Well, I broke her career. My ex-fiancé and I were together a good amount of time. I fell in love with her, put a ring on her finger, and was completely loyal to her for the whole stretch. I'll use the name Julia. Julia decided to tell me that she wasn't happy. She needed a break. She was no longer in love with me. After some digging, I found out she was screwing around behind my back. When confronted, she deleted everything. Compared to her phone records, there was quite a bit missing. After betraying my trust and lying to me for 8 months straight, I felt it was necessary to even the playing field, considering she wasn't feeling the same hurt I was feeling. Julia worked in the car sales industry. During her time there, she would send me surveys to complete if she thought her customers would leave a bad one. It's an industry norm, but never talked about. Negative surveys lead to a lower average, and if the average drops below a certain point, she owes money. If it stays above, she gets money for every positive survey she has. This is against her company's customer privacy policies. We would intentionally leave the house when we filled them out so my home IP wouldn't be attached. I was getting credit card offers in my email for these customers. On top of the survey fiasco, she was taking certification tests for people at her workplace for cash and who knows what else. The worst part was the guy she was screwing around with was a co-worker. She originally masked her texts with him, saying she was working a deal. My next step was to write all of this up, send it to the manufacturer, her employer's corporate office, and the trainer for the region. I also included some media sites and made it so they'd feel more inclined to take action. The next day I was contacted by her corporate office and asked to call in to provide more detail. I did and was assured that this matter will be investigated swiftly. I was able to provide the emails to corporate, and that's what ultimately sealed the coffin. During this ordeal, I wasn't quiet about it. I told Julia what I was doing. She thought the managers had her back and she was untouchable. A day passed and she left her work, and an hour later she returned, screaming and crying about how she had been suspended. The following day, I got a text from Julia saying she had been fired. Not only did she lose her job, she lost her career. She'll never step back into a car sales position for the rest of her life. In short, my fiancé cheated on me and I ruined her career. Am I the jerk? Well, everyone sucks here. Your partner sucks for cheating and carrying out such crappy work practices. Her company sucks for letting this go on for so long and then only firing her when it looked like it would spread to the press. And the author double sucks. First, for getting someone fired for unrelated reasons to their job, and secondly, for aiding and abetting her illegal work practices and then tattling on her for revenge. This really rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah, being cheated on sucks and wrenches your heart in half, but I can't imagine just having the inherent hate in my heart to try and burn down someone else's life as they left. Oh, and try is the operative word here. Car salespeople have a shifty reputation for a reason. A lot of people in the comments were chiming in to inform the author that this woman probably walked into another dealership the next day to land a job. These places don't want upstanding moral citizens, they want people who are prepared to cut any deal no matter how dastardly to sell cars. So hopefully you left it there, were satisfied with your petty temporary revenge, and you both tried to be better people afterwards. Somehow, I doubt it though. You're going to assign me to make balloon animals at a site with no kids? Okay, I'll just do my job. Way back in the long ago, in the before times, mid-level chain restaurants would have these people walk around to make balloon animals for kids as they waited for their food. I was a teenager and needed money, so I did this for a while. The restaurant would pay this agency, and they'd tell us what restaurant to go to and when. Key to this story is that we weren't paid. On an average night, I'd make around $50 in tips over 3 hours, and on special nights it could be as high as $200. But if there were no customers, I'd make nothing. Yes, it was in the US, and it was probably illegal to not pay me, but it was in the 90s, I was a teenager, I didn't know better, and I was happy enough with the money I made, most of the time. After working for several months, I must have fallen out of someone's favor, and I got assigned to a restaurant in the business district. I have no idea why they wanted someone making balloon animals there. The key audience was kids, and I never saw anyone there under 30. The first night there, I made $5, which wasn't even enough to cover mass transit to and from the location. After being assigned there twice in a row, I complained. But I was told that if I didn't go, I'd be banned from any more assignments. Cue malicious compliance. The next week when I was assigned there, which was the third time in a row, I waited until there were a couple of guys at the bar that were tipsy. I went up and asked if they wanted balloon hats. No charge. They were hesitant, but I promised they'd be good. They agreed, and I got to work. I broke out all of my skills to make these hats that were clearly people in a cage. The people were all pink and had prominent bubbles on the chest and derriere. An inflated balloon tied around the waist made for a bikini bottom, and a carefully tied balloon in their hand made for a bikini top. They asked what it was, and I told them an exotic dancer in a cage. They loved it. I got a $20 tip, but more importantly, they went to every person in the restaurant to show off their highly adult exotic dancers in cage hats. They demanded to talk to the manager to tell him how awesome it was, the super uptight fundamentalist manager. The manager was not happy and told me to go home early. The agency called, angry, but I used my most innocent voice to tell them I was just making what the customer asked for, and I didn't know they'd make a scene. Agency said, well, they banned you from ever coming back. The next week, I went back to another $17 an hour location. In short, I deliberately got myself banned from a crappy worksite by making a risque balloon animal. Why did that restaurant want a balloon animal maker? That's the only massive conundrum in this post for me. You definitely weren't a jerk. You saw a way to get yourself out of a crappy situation and you took it. Winning. And although crass, your balloon making skills seem really advanced. I don't know that I could make a regular stick figure, let alone one that was recognizable as an exotic dancer. Props to you and your very specific set of skills. Entitled parent claws at my face for taking my life-saving medicine on the bus. 'Cause I am a, quote, filthy junkie. Just for reference, this just happened yesterday. I was on the bus heading home from the pharmacy after re-upping my prescription. A bit of backstory. I'm unfortunate enough to be human immunodeficiency virus positive, and because of this I have to take antiretroviral medication every day, otherwise the virus will damage my immune system further. Because of what's been recently going on in this country, I've been mainly working from home. As a result, I've really fallen off when it comes to my appearance. On this particular day, I just had on some really baggy sweatpants and a janky hoodie. So I guess I could see how from a certain perspective I could look a little homeless. After a couple of minutes on the bus, I noticed this little kid staring at me, and I guess my appearance might have frightened him. But as a person of color, I'm kind of used to getting a couple of odd glances, so I just went back to minding my own business. At this point, I started to take my medication while on the bus, mainly because I didn't want to forget later. While this was happening, I got a sharp reminder that people were watching. Cue the entitled parent of scared kid screaming at me, "How dare you? Have you people no shame?" I was so shocked that all I could say was, "What?" She continued by yelling, "What do you mean what? Who do you think you are? Stop popping pills in front of my kid in a public place, you filthy junkie." At this point, I start getting mad. I held up the bottle and tried to explain that it wasn't what she thought it was, but before I could finish explaining, she tried to snatch it while shrieking about how I'm a leech to society and how if I was raised right and had real parents, I wouldn't be a, quote, disgusting addict. That last one made me pretty mad because both my parents work really hard and are both wonderful people. So I kind of lost it. What the frick would you know about parenting? The day your kid moves out will be the happiest day of his life. After I said that, she completely forgot about the medication and just straight up launched herself at me on some Superman crap and started clawing at my face. So boom, at this point entitled parent and I had the attention of pretty much the entire bus, including the bus driver. Luckily, we soon came to a stop and the driver helped remove her and her kid from the bus, but not before she yelled some questionable stuff on her way out. Yikes. You people. I think this lady just outed herself pretty hard. That's one heck of an assumption to just make about someone in public, and she really needs to check why she leapt to all these assumptions about the guy's parents as well. Has she had this tirade at every diabetic person she saw taking an insulin shot too? And her instantly leaping into the offensive the second the focus was turned onto her speaks volumes about how stable a person she is. Sounds like she's the one who has no shame to be causing this kind of commotion in public about something she was clearly completely uninformed about. If the bus had camera footage, you probably would have had grounds for pressing charges of assault and battery, if nothing else. A few of my videos lately have featured mothers flying off the handlebars, supposedly to protect their kids from, quote, bad examples like yourself, and the level of responsibility they try to take on themselves in seizing contraband like this is breathtaking. Just how dull is your life that this is a thing that occupies your mind? Steal from me, I'll ruin your career. This was about 2 years ago in college. I just moved into a house off campus with 3 of my closest friends. There were 2 other college guys already living there. All of these guys were doing Air Force Reserves with me. Basically, you go into the military after you graduate. I really liked all of my roommates and the house, except for one of the dudes that was already living there. He had a dog that would constantly rip up, pee, crap on the carpet, and he wouldn't clean it up. Furthermore, he'd yell at us for leaving dirty dishes in the sink, while he was the one making the vast majority of the mess. I had a job working 30 hours a week and doing school full-time and doing Reserve Officer Training Corps. My job was as a server, so I'd make quite a lot of tips, like $300 a week. I'd leave the cash in my room, boxed up, because I trusted everyone in the house. We were all going to join the military, and integrity is a big thing. So I went on to deposit my tips in the bank after not going for about a month, and I was shocked when my cash deposit was only about $200 when I knew it had to be at least $1,200. I knew someone was stealing my tips then because it made sense, because my deposits seemed a little low for a while. I was furious because I was barely scraping by working my butt off to pay for college. So I bought a security camera for my room and hid it. I got all the documents from my work regarding the tips I'd made over the past few months, and I continued leaving my tips in the box unconcealed as bait. I didn't tell any of my roommates about this. Sure enough, I leave for a trip and I got a notification on my phone. I watch as this mother fricker that I trusted steals about $300 in cash from me, taking only $20 bills so I wouldn't notice. Well, the next day back from the trip, I schedule a meeting with our commander. I bring him all the evidence and video footage and tell him about my awful experiences with him in my house, with my other roommates as witnesses. Long story shorter, he got kicked out of the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I ruined his career. He had to pay me back about $1,000, and I let him off easy, by the way, and he had to pay the military back about $9,000. He'd been getting paid by them for about a year. In addition, we go to an expensive school and he chose a useless major, so he's stacked high in student debt with no real way out. And finally, he had just quit his job because he thought he could get away with stealing from me and watching TV at home. And he just crashed his dream car he'd been working on for a while because he drives like an idiot. Surprise! I still see him every so often on campus and I smile at him. In short, jerk roommate steals my tips and I ended his whole career. Did I go too far? You're not a jerk. I'd say I'd definitely worry about your safety if that guy is just walking around out there and seems to have as few scruples as you describe with doing crappy stuff. If his situation is as desperate as you've made it out to be, and he thinks that you and your flatmates are to blame, you might want to move or something. Still, you were definitely right to turn him in some capacity. He sounds like the worst kind of hypocritical flatmate aside from just kind of being a scumbag who's content to casually steal people's money without contemplating that they might notice that the occasional grand has gone missing. In fact, his complacence is rather breathtaking to the point where he was just okay stacking himself with debt and thinking he could just have his combination of military service and theft go ahead without a hitch. I thought it was a little humorous that you could go to your military commander like they were some kind of school dean, But then again, if this kind of thing happened in a full-time barracks, you would do the same kind of thing for your CO as well. Thanks for reminding the rest of us to make direct bank deposits with our cash payouts, or at the very least, to invest in a metal lockbox. Since you want to judge me for riding up to the second floor, have fun waiting for the elevator. I was waiting at the elevators. It didn't take too long since my apartment building is not that big. I get inside and right when the door closes, a hand pushes through. She looked like your typical middle-aged Karen. She presses the 17th floor and she takes one look at my floor, which was on the second. She scoffs, glares at me and said, "The second floor? Really?" It didn't take too much to tee me off. Her comment was so unnecessary and uncalled for. Who cares if it was the second floor? It's my decision whether to take the stairs or not. I just finished an overnight shift and I was exhausted. I guess my exhaustion made me extra moody, because when I reached my floor, she was scrolling through her phone. I quickly ran my hand over as many buttons as I could and said, "Have fun, B-word," right when the door closed. And because I was extra exhausted, therefore extra moody and petty, I pressed the up button when the elevator barely reached the third floor, so I could use the other elevator and press a bunch of buttons again to further inconvenience her just in case she decided to get off on the third floor to take the other elevator. Take the stairs then if it's not that big a deal for you, Karen. Just don't be fricking rude to your neighbors for riding elevators to the second floor. You don't know if they're exhausted or if they have non-visible health conditions that make it hard for them to take the stairs. Look, lady, I get it. I too am one of the psychopaths who flogs themselves unnecessarily up staircases in the vain hope that my tiny little saving of energy will one day save the planet, while I work for 10 hours a day from my high-powered computer. And yeah, from time to time I'll judge someone else for taking a lift up one floor, but I'll do that silently in my head. Because that's how you avoid people taking punitive measures against you for being a jerk. And she is a jerk for the reasons the author outlines. We're all technically allowed to make this kind of witchy judgment, and almost all of us do every day. We just need to keep them to ourselves because acting on them is what makes you the topic of one of these videos. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Entitled Step-Grandma Ruins My Graduation Party Because I Didn't Share the Attention with My Sisters. As a background, I have an amazing mother and father who never married and a bit of a jerk stepdad. I tolerate him because he's family, and although we disagree on a lot of crap, it's at least a long-term relationship. He had 2 daughters with my mother, Emily and Nicole, and they visit their grandmother often. We talk once in a while, but not very much for various reasons, including her entitled attitude, hence my own attitude towards the story you're about to hear. She just thinks that her granddaughters deserve the world and hates me for not being her direct spawn. She can't stand the thought that her son has to live with me, a scum who isn't in her bloodline. This happened almost exactly a year ago. 2 weeks before graduation party, my mum said, "Hey V, just wanted to rant your ear off a bit." So apparently step-grandma invited herself over to stay the night for graduation. I said, "What? But we've already got like 5 other family members staying the night. I'm already getting kicked out of my own bed for 2 weeks because of family. I'm already going to have to sleep on the floor. Can't you tell her to wait until the day after?" She says, "I know and I'm sorry." She's acting like she's the only out-of-town visitor staying the night. You know she won't take no for an answer. Ugh, fine. As long as she doesn't try anything, I suppose I'll be fine for one night. I know my attitude was crappy, but I know the entitled lady well, and I was also already in a bit of a bad mood. Plus, I hardly talked to Step-Grammy, so I was a little annoyed with the idea of staying here for the night. I reluctantly dropped the subject and continued making plans for my graduation party. The night before the party, Granny arrives. "Hello, dearies, here's your graduation presents," and hands out Barbie toys to my 2 sisters. Keep in mind though, although Emily is graduating to junior high, Nicole is only moving up a grade, and she doesn't give me a present or any money. I said, "Hey Grammy, I'm laying out the spare air mattress for you. There's food in the fridge, but please keep out of the containers with post-it notes on them. That's for the party tomorrow." She doesn't respond and goes into the kitchen while my half-sisters play with their new Barbies. I went to bed since I knew that I, an extreme introvert, would need as much energy as possible for the next day. I really fricking regret it. Party day comes around, my family members are shouting congratulations, and my mum says, "Let's bring out the cake." When the cake is put on the table, Step Grammy proceeds to take the knife and starts cutting a slice. I say, excuse me, I'd like the first slice of my graduation cake.
No, you've got to choose the design, so it's only fair that the little ones get the first slices.
My mum has had enough of this behaviour and goes on a rant about how this is my party and if Grammy doesn't give her the knife, she'd kick her out. She was not pleased with this and screams about how I was an attention hoarder and how I wasn't giving the other children their share of the attention. She screams that the other children deserve the same treatment because they're, quote, graduating too. Emily starts crying over the fact that she isn't getting any cake. Full-blown tantrum. Keep in mind, she's almost a freaking teenager. She knew full well that she'd get some cake in like a minute. The other family members are staring and embarrassed. Nobody comes in to help because in all the passionate conversation, Grammy is waving the knife around like a freaking idiot. After what felt like an hour of arguing, Mum decides that the argument was going nowhere, snatched the knife from Gram's dumb idiot hand, and gave me my well-earned chocolate cake slice with sprinkles, whilst Grammy tried to snatch the knife back. It tasted like a slice from heaven itself. Once I got my slice, I was stupid enough to turn around and walk back to my seat. Grammy was so obsessed with my piece of cake that she raced up behind me and smacks the plate clean out of my hand. She then stormed off, leaving a crowd of stunned people. I was almost in tears due to her bullcrap. After a moment of pure silence, Mum came over and hugged me and gave me the next slice. Nicole sat next to me and tried to cheer me up, but it was no use. I was still polite to the other family members, but my day was ruined. I was extremely grateful for them coming to the party and giving me presents and graduation money, but Graham's actions really hurt my feelings. The next few hours felt like forever. I'll admit I was kind of a wimp when it came to my feelings getting hurt, but man, I was hella excited for that piece of cake. But wait, there's more. After most of the other family members left, it was just me, my immediate family, 4 other very close relatives, and Grammy. I left the party for a bit of well-earned me time and decided to eat some of my copycat Starbucks iced lemon pound cake. When I looked around the fridge, I couldn't find it anywhere. I was hysterical. I admittedly started ugly crying over that crap. I was in denial. There was no way Grammy ate an entire frickin' cake. I was, surprisingly, partially correct. I found a single small slice of it left in the very back with a post-it note with the writing of Grammy on it. I was furious. So mad that I forgot how fricking hungry I was. Confronting her was much more important. I confronted her and she said that since I didn't give her any of the graduation cake, she, Emily, and Nicole ate the cake that was in the fridge. After all, they deserved a cake just like me. They didn't share with any of the other family members. I was heartbroken. I felt defeated. After she left, I cried in my room for about an hour. Mum walked in, red as a fire truck, and said, "Did you eat all the freaking lemon cake without us?" No. Grammy, Emily, and Nicole ate it all. Mum's face went white and then flushed with embarrassment. "Oh my god, are you serious? I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I wanted to bring it out, but we couldn't find it. I thought maybe you ate it all." "No, I didn't get a single slice." "Oh, honey. Well, I don't know if it'll make you feel better, but there is one slice left with Grammy's name on it. She forgot to take it home. It's your cake, you should have it." "Really? Yes, please." I raced into the kitchen and scarfed down my lemon cake slice. Nicole later came in and apologized. Apparently, Grammy said that I let them have the cake. Emily still won't admit to eating it, but the whole ordeal was awful. If only Grammy wasn't so damn entitled, maybe this could have all gone better. Sorry, no happy ending. I still refuse to forgive her. I still have to talk to her and visit for her for the holidays, but I've moved on. And I definitely won't let my pushover parents make the guest list for my parties anymore. All guests need to be approved by me when it comes to my parties. Still, I'm a bit crappy over my graduation. The old hag hasn't seen me in about a year, but she also hasn't been invited places as much as usual. So it's nice that the family is sort of avenging me. Oh my god, what an awful woman. Well, the good news is that I'm not sure that anyone apart from her would possibly ever conceive that literally anyone else but Grammy was to blame. Can you imagine coming to a party and bringing a gift for the two siblings of the person whom the party was in honor of, but not the person themselves? Breathtakingly obvious snub from the old witch. I'd say that in the long run, not being too aggressive in response might have actually helped you. You only looked better in the face of her awfulness in front of the rest of the family, and with any luck, they'll pick you over her anytime there's a family get-together. It sounds like she's pretty miserable as is, so moving on and leaving her to gradually isolate herself with her own behavior while you thrive might be your greatest chance at victory. Of course, there's the very slim ghost of a chance that she'll change her ways one day and apologize for being such a monster, but let's not wait in vain for that to happen. Hopefully Emily will eventually grow out of her example. It sounds like we can put a little bit of her selfishness down to childishness and being given the opportunity of cake at a party. And hopefully she'll see what the rest of your family are doing to Grandma and take some notes on how not to behave. Tell your boss you're quitting. This isn't my story, but my mother's. She died recently at the age of 89, and my sister and I were reminiscing. This is one of our favorite stories involving our mother. My brothers called her V because her first name begins with a V, so I'll refer to her as V as well. This happened many years ago, about the time I graduated from high school. V had taken a job, her first since she and Dad got married, in a public kindergarten. Now, my dad was always a bit of a bully, especially towards my mother. My dad was not a nice person, and that's a whole story in itself. V had survived ovarian cancer at the age of 33, so she was probably around 38 or 39 when this happened. Now, my dad insisted that if she was going to hold down a job, she still had to do all of her chores when she got home. The cooking, cleaning, and laundry, among other things. I can't remember exactly what prompted the argument about her chores, but something didn't get done one day that he expected, and he demanded she do it. He informed her that she would tell her boss that she was quitting when she went back to work the next day. Before he left for work the next day, he reminded her that she was to tell her boss that she was quitting. Cue malicious compliance. I loved my mum. She went to work that morning, stopped at her boss's office and said these exact words. "My husband said to tell you that I was quitting," and then moseyed on to her classroom. A few minutes later, her very puzzled boss popped in and asked her if she was serious. She said, "No, but my husband told me to tell you I was quitting, so I did." And no, she didn't quit her job until she was good and ready several years later. Eventually, she quit working for that awful man in her own household. She stayed with him for financial security only. When he left her for the second affair partner, he left her destitute. For the first time in her life, she had to accept food stamps because she still had a child at home. Dad returned home in 1980 and just dumped all of his stuff in the living room, went to their bedroom, and moved right on in. She dumped his stuff into the bedroom and moved into the living room couch herself. That's where she lived until she died. She never spent another night in their bedroom. What a gross man. Sadly, it seems like she was inclined or forced to stay in the same household as him for the rest of their life. I don't know whether that's incredibly sad, a really brave act of defiance, or both. She almost certainly deserved better than living with a cheating, paranoid chauvinist. Still, she raised a family, and the author at least seems to have had nothing but admiration for her. I hope her and her kids at least had a good relationship. Screw that dad.
Infertile neighbor says, "I'm not allowed to sunbathe in my yard because I'm pregnant?" And it upsets her. My husband, 29, and I, 28, have been living here for 5 years, ever since we married. Our previous neighbors were an adorable couple in their 60s or 70s, and we had a fairly good relationship, and we were kind of sad when they left. This year, I gave birth to my son, who's now 6 months old. My new neighbors, let's call them Paul and Anna, moved in when I was 2 months pregnant. We weren't friends, but we'd say hi to each other here and there. I sunbathe every day. It's something I've been doing since childhood. I was a very anemic kid, and my mum helped me to do it to help with my anemia. I don't even know if it works, but it is a habit that helps me start my day. This was not a problem until my pregnancy became apparent. The left side of the yard has 2 kinds of fences. One low, about 1.5 meters, that used to have a hedge on the neighbor's side, and Paul and Anna cut it down. And one taller fence, 2 meters, around the rest of the backyard. It's hard to see it from the ground, but they can still see our whole yard and part of our main floor from their second floor. When I was 5 months pregnant, Paul told my husband that my sunbathing was making them uncomfortable. I sunbathed in shorts and tank tops, nothing out of the ordinary. I just ignored them and kept my routine. The following month, he complained again. Complained every month until the 8th month of my pregnancy. I was back from a walk with my husband and Anna was in front of the house. Once she saw me, she stormed inside and slammed the door. The following day, Paul came to our house and told us they have fertility problems, and seeing me pregnant was making her heavily uncomfortable, and I was an insensitive witch. Currently, I'm working from home and the baby is close to me in a playpen in the living room, and we have another in the backyard on the terrace, so I can have him close to me when gardening or just playing with him. Well, apparently I made his wife uncomfortable again yesterday. I was in the living room playing with the baby when Paul knocked. He asked me to move from the living room because his wife could see me from their balcony. I told him to look the other direction and leave me alone. Today, my husband and I were just grilling some meat in the backyard. The baby was hungry, so I started to breastfeed. When I looked at their house, Anna was on the balcony. She went in, and a few minutes later, Paul was at our door again. I gave my son to my husband and I answered the door. Paul went off on me for breastfeeding in public, again, my fenced yard, and for being inconsiderate. When he finished, I told him to leave us alone and to not knock on my door again. And if his wife is so upset over seeing a baby, she needs therapy and not him harassing my family. And I'll do everything I want in my own home. At the time, I felt justified, but I was venting to my mum later and she told me I was wrong, and I couldn't really understand because I've never suffered from infertility and I need to apologize to Paul and Anna. We're also talking to our lawyers about a restraining order. He told us to get some footage because until now we only have our word and our other neighbor's testimony, and if Paul shows up again to record it, and to call the cops. If he came to my house 5 times, to call the cops each time, but still it'll be hard to get a restraining order. So we've begun to try and ensure our privacy a little better. I sat down with my husband to talk about precautions. I was so annoyed that I hadn't actually been thinking about the real risk that this couple could pose. We'll be installing cameras and a taller fence. Unfortunately, their vision from their balcony will stay the same because the city won't let us build taller than 4 meters. But this will help anyway. I called my dad to get some help with the fence, and he ended up talking to my mum. She called and apologized to me. She suffered from infertility and postpartum depression, and when I spoke to her, she said she felt Anna's pain, but she also remembers that some of the stuff she did at the time was crazy and she regretted it later. She gave me some extra precautions to take. So, am I the jerk? Definitely not. As you've mentioned, these people clearly need some therapy. I can't believe that they'd behave this way every time they see women and babies in public, so asking you to just not exist in their line of sight in your own home is absolutely ridiculous. I do feel a little bad for Anna. She's clearly feeling a lot of pain at not being able to be a mother, but I should restate, I'm not just saying she should get therapy so that she and her husband stop being a pain in the butt. The more important factor would be helping her come to terms and acceptance with her hurt and being able to be around families without feeling as sad. Paul is also just trying to protect his wife from what he likely knows is a source of emotional turmoil. Unlike a lot of our stories, I can see why these people are taking their actions, even if they are 100% in the wrong. With all that said, if they don't take better steps to help themselves get over the problem, then sadly the best thing the author can do is working out better ways to protect her family from them. Like cameras, privacy, and potentially a restraining order. I'd be a little concerned at how they'll behave when you have a loud toddler in their visual and hearing range instead of just a baby. I was refused database access and told to submit tickets. So I submit tickets. This happened back at my last job in 2018. To give some background, I was working as a data analyst at a company in the ed tech sector. For one of my projects, I created a report that we could give to the sales team that they could then use when asking clients to renew their contract. Clients were typically school systems or individual schools. The report was all graphs, even adults like pretty pictures, and it showed the clients data on how teachers and students were using the product. Then our sales guys could show, hey, X% of your students and teachers are using this feature X times a week, so you should sign a new contract with us. And then I developed this report for our biggest client and had the top people in the sales team all put in their input when developing it. The big client renewed, which was great. They loved the report and wanted to use it for all renewals, and we had more than 5,000 clients. I had to automate the process and everything seemed peachy until I hit a problem. The data for the report was pulled from our database, MSSQL if you're curious. Now, I was in the research department and I didn't have access to the database. Instead, our IT team had exclusive access. If I wanted data, I had to put in a ticket, name all the data points I wanted, and I could only name one client per ticket. Also, IT did their work in sprints, which are typically 2-week periods of work. The tickets were always added to the next sprint, so I ended up having to wait 2 to 4 weeks for data. This was fine for the big client report, but now that I was running this report for all renewals, the ticket system wasn't going to work. Now, if you've worked with sales, you know that they typically don't plan out 2 to 4 weeks ahead. At least they didn't at my company. So I reached out to IT and requested direct access to the database so I could stop putting in tickets and just pull the data myself. I even asked for read-only access so I couldn't muck up anything for IT. It was all cloud-based as well, so they could just dynamically get more compute if I pushed the limit. Well, that request was immediately denied. All data requests will be filed by only IT. And as a research person, I apparently needed to stay in my lane. You might see where this is going. I wasn't happy and sales wasn't happy with the delay, but there was nothing anyone could do. So, I reached out to one of the sales managers to discuss a solution. Since data was going to take 2 to 4 weeks to arrive, could he please send me everyone that has a renewal coming up in the next 2 to 4 weeks? With more than 5,000 customers, that averages about 100 renewals a week. He smiled and understood what was going on, and happily sent me a list of more than 400 clients. Quick note, the IT team spends the day before a sprint planning the next sprint, and all tickets submitted before the sprint had to be completed during the next sprint. The sprint planning time was always Friday afternoon because the least amount of tickets rolled in. During the planning session, they'd plan all the work for the next 2 weeks, for the next sprint. Any tickets that came in before 5 p.m. on Friday had to be finished over the next 2 weeks. Time for my malicious compliance. Armed with my list of more than 400 clients, I figured out when the next sprint started and cleared my schedule for the day before the new IT sprint started. Basically, their sprint planning on Friday. At about 1 minute a ticket, it was going to take me about 6 hours and 40 minutes to submit all the tickets, so that's what I spent my entire Friday doing. Let's not forget they had to get the data for all the tickets during the next sprint, as long as I submitted them before 5 p.m. on Friday. That meant they had to take care of all 400 tickets in the next 2 weeks. Plus, I submitted tickets throughout their sprint planning meeting, so they couldn't even plan for it all. Now, if you're not tech-savvy, this might not make sense. But if you are, let me add an extra twist to this. They used Jira at the time, and the entire IT team had the Jira app on their laptops. Most of them had push notifications set up, so they got pinged every time a ticket was submitted by yours truly. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall during that meeting and watching a new ticket pop up about every minute or so. The only way to make it better would be to have a script running that could submit the tickets for me. Now, I wasn't a good enough coder at the time to do it, but if it happened today, I would totally do that. Alright, tech stuff aside, I didn't hear a peep from them at all that Friday. And to their credit, Monday I started getting data from my tickets. Now, I'd automated the reporting process on my end, so each report only took me a few minutes to run. I was churning out reports as quickly as I received the data, without an issue, and sales was loving it. I saw tickets coming in from every member of the IT team, and during the second week, many tickets came in after working hours. So obviously, they were struggling to keep up. Again, I'll give them full credit, they fulfilled every single one of the tickets, but there were a lot of long days for them. Everyone here was on salary, so there was no overtime pay either. This was, of course, on top of all the other tickets they needed to complete for their day-to-day jobs, so it was quite a stressful sprint. Undeterred, I met with the sales manager again right before the next sprint and asked for the next set of clients with renewals. Then, the day before the next sprint, I began submitting tickets again. My workday started at 9 a.m., and by 10 a.m., the head of IT ran over to me. He was bug-eyed and asked me how many tickets I was planning on submitting. I told him the same amount as last time, even though this time I only really had 200, but he didn't know that. And I'm pretty sure I saw him break on the inside. I did feel bad at this point, so I said, Alternatively, you could just give me access to the database and I could query the data myself. I had the access before noon. In short, IT says I need to submit tickets for data instead of giving me direct access. I submit hundreds of tickets until they relent and give me access. They didn't want to trust a lowly researcher, so I made them my data monkeys. Am I the jerk? Well, a fair bit of the tech talk flew directly over the narrator's head, but nonetheless, this is a really funny story. To be honest, I wondered if you were going to automate some sort of process to speedily submit all the tickets on the last hour of the Friday or something, and make them stay up until the crack of dawn. But honestly, they were all probably demoralized enough already. It's a fine line between teaching someone a lesson and absolutely torturing them. A lot of the more tech-savvy commenters were remarking that this sort of insistence by IT that everything be requested and run through them is far from unusual and causes all sorts of hold-ups in all sorts of jobs. I'm sure that IT do have their own reasons. Most likely it's an accountability thing, but yeah, it seems like they quickly decided in this case that being able to more exactly pinpoint where problems came from was less important than not having to flog themselves to death on what should have just been a routine job. Also, I'm kind of amazed that you had to resort to this rather than reporting to someone else that multiple teams were being held up by this routine, and that you had to use an entire workday to submit tickets on something that should have been no trouble at all. Definitely a little jerky, but also funny, so you get a pass. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Sure, I'll take down my negative Yelp review. This happened to me a few years ago. I was owed a significant sum of money by the company which handles my doctor's billing. She worked at a large healthcare system which outsourced billing to this company. For months and months, I tried via email and phone to get the money back. But each contact I was treated rudely or ignored. They would either say they were still working on it or would act like I'd never requested the money in the first place and needed to start the process over. It was maddening. One day, after receiving another rude email from this company, I decided to leave a Yelp review on my doctor's page. I essentially said that while the doctor and her staff were helpful and professional, the billing company they used was atrocious and made the entire experience not worth it. Lo and behold, the very next day I got a call from the CEO of the billing company. He asked what the problem is and I explained. He says, "Okay, I'll make sure the money gets sent ASAP. Can you please take the review down?" Apparently, he was getting angry calls from my doctor and he seemed pretty pressured to get it taken down. I respond that I can take the review down after I get my money back. He gladly accepts my offer. A week later, there's my check in the mail. Here's the thing though, I never specified how long until I'd take the review down after I got the money. So I waited a week. I got some calls and texts from the CEO and I ignored them. I waited another week. Respond that I'm having technical problems logging into Yelp, but should have it resolved soon. After about 6 months of him reaching out and me being as unhelpful as possible, I finally took it down. The next time I returned to that doctor's office, it was a whole new billing system. Not sure if my review made a difference, but it was a sweet malicious compliance regardless. Update. I went back to review my correspondence with the billing company. It made me realize the whole situation was even more screwed than I'd originally described here. The reason they owed me money was because at first my insurance company had told me they were not going to cover the appointments because the doctor wasn't in network. However, I found the doctor through my insurance website. When I went back to check, the doctor's name was no longer listed on their website. Luckily for me, I'd taken a screenshot at the time so I could have the phone number for the doctor on hand. After I sent the insurance company the screenshot, they agreed to cover the appointments. They paid the billing company, and yet the billing company refused to refund me the money I'd paid. So essentially, they were collecting both from myself and the insurance company and trying to get away with it. American healthcare in a nutshell. Also, when I told my wife about this post, she told me I need to make a correction. The CEO sent me a check within 4 days. It wasn't even an entire week, after months and months of reaching out to them. I'm not going to provide the name of the billing company. I don't need any more drama with them. The insurance company was Aetna.
Seriously, screw them. Screw all insurance companies. Sincerely, a narrator who is still waiting on a payout from one of his a year later. But back to your problem. That seems quite criminal even by the standards of most of these organizations. I can understand why you wouldn't want to take things any further after all the hassle you've been through, but perhaps it would be worth seeing if other people were having serious problems with them as well, and whether they'd have grounds for some kind of group lawsuit. I hope that there weren't any angry looks from your doctor the next time you visited them. Although you obviously specified it wasn't her fault, it might have affected some people's decision on whether to use her going forward. Then again, it seems like she upgraded and everyone is probably better for it. It's quite funny that the company was clearly small enough that one Yelp review merited a personal response by the CEO of the company. They were clearly a combination of being quite a small insurance company themselves and one that wasn't doing quite well for this to happen. But then again, if they were deliberately withholding several grand worth of double-dipped finances, that company definitely deserved to die. Author is not the jerk. Parent wants to be updated for misbehavior and gets hit with a monsoon of phone calls. Some background, this takes place in a preschool with 3-year-olds. At this school, many of the teachers have children attending here, obviously because they get a big discount, which isn't a problem. Most of the teachers don't mind their child's teacher reprimanding or redirecting their behavior as they are teachers themselves. But then there's entitled admin. She's the annoying admin who would call in the middle of our lessons to remind us to take pictures of the kids or stupid stuff like that, which we do every single day. She loves to micromanage everyone. I've had several issues with her in the past over these phone calls, as have other teachers. Entitled admin had a son in my class. We'll call him Tiny Monster. He wasn't actually a bad kid overall, but when he would act out, yikes. But my co-workers and I, we work in teams, could easily handle him. However, entitled admin would constantly tell us to call her when he acts up. Now the thing is, we don't call parents for misbehavior, so why would we call her? We don't do it for any of the other teachers who have kids here. Tiny Monster is just like other 3-year-olds. We can easily redirect him, which is why we couldn't believe she wanted to be involved in the first place. She finally blew up at my coworker and I about it, saying how he never gets prizes and if we just called her, he'd behave better. When I left, I looked at my coworker, who looked super annoyed, and a plan came to mind. Cue malicious compliance. Every time Tiny Monster would misbehave, I called the front office. Got up during lessons? Called. Talked back? Called. Screamed at us? Called. Told a friend he was stupid? Called. Going to pee too much? Called. Didn't cover his mouth when sneezing? Called. Anything slightly out of the ordinary, we called up front to let entitled admin know what was going on. Let me tell you, these phone calls really added up. She had physically come to the room after each call the first day, but pretty soon she started getting annoyed and would just say, "Thanks for telling me," by day 2. So the fallout. After 3 days of calling for little things, another admin came to talk to us about why we're calling so much for one student. We explained entitled admin's request, and she laughed at how ridiculous it was to have us do it in the first place. She talked to entitled admin and explained it was unreasonable to have us call when we don't call other parents. The requests to call her stopped, and we continued on with the school year. It's not a huge malicious compliance, but it was a victory. You generally think that the people who work in education wouldn't fall prey to the same foibles that make some parents in these stories such unaware jerks. But here's proof otherwise, or at least an exception that proves the rule. I know enough teachers to know that any parent who demands an excessive amount of special treatment is going to be subject to ridicule from every member of staff in a given school. I'm absolutely certain that being in the staff room, this front desk lady has heard all the gossip about entitled parents and their ridiculous requests, which is part of why this whole situation strikes me as being so weird. And she's also clearly a bit of a jerk for exploding at the other teachers like this. And the fact that when confronted with the reality of what she was asking, she just kind of disassociated and stopped responding accordingly, that's hilarious. Clearly the other admin person had a much better idea of how to behave. Great story, thanks for writing in. Pregnant coworker gets her just desserts. So, I worked in this small, family-owned office that runs 24/7. That's about 25 employees total, but in the office there's only like 12 of us. The rest work off-site. There's a woman who works there. We'll call her Jill. Jill is almost 40 and has been here for about 10 years. Reference, I've been here for just over 4 years. Since I've been hired, and from what I hear for her entire employment, she's never agreed to switch shifts with anyone. Not once. Not a single time has she done anyone a favor, no matter what. Yet, she has no issue constantly asking other people to switch shifts with her. She'd always take a shift from whatever person she was switching with to keep the hours even for everyone. But it was only when she needed it, and not the other way round, and it would always be within the same work week since we got paid by the hour. So ultimately, it wasn't like the person working this shift instead of that shift, all within the same week, was doing them any favors in the end. So, she asks to switch shifts all the time but won't agree to switch shifts when someone else needs to, is what I'm trying to say. Switch as in she works their shift and they work her shift. The only way to return that favor is to agree to switch shifts with them the next time they need it, which she does not do. A year into my employment, my brother needed emergency surgery, and I begged her to cover my shift the next day, and all she said was, "Sunday's my only day to sleep in. Sorry." I never forgot that. Whatever, she's not obligated to switch shifts. It's her prerogative if she just wants to be universally disliked by our entire office. Anyway, Jill got pregnant about 7 months ago, completely accidentally, and was actually quite freaked out about it for a while. She's pretty much been nauseous her entire pregnancy and even keeps a trash can next to her desk just in case she can't make it to the bathroom. Yesterday, she was feeling really sick around 12:30 p.m. She asked her boss if she could leave early. He told her she could only leave if she could get someone to agree to finish her shift. Our shifts are mainly 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., then 3 to 11 p.m., and then 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., with periodic split shifts thrown in as needed. I was working morning yesterday and scheduled to leave at 3 p.m., and she was scheduled until 7 p.m. The only other person that could have stayed for her had plans right after his shift, so I was her only option. She waited until 2:45 and then sauntered up to my desk, puppy dog eyes fully engaged, and asked me to stay for the rest of her shift because she was feeling really ill. Now, I'm on Reddit a lot, and I never forgot this one post I saw about a nasty manager refusing to allow her employee to be at her dying son's bedside. There's a line in that text exchange that I loved, and I've been waiting for the perfect moment to use, and this was it. I swiveled to face Jill, look her right in the eyes, trail my eyes down to her bulging, unplanned, pregnant stomach, and pointedly say, "A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part," and just swiveled right back and continued working without another word. It was glorious. Her face instantly dropped. It looked like someone had tooted into her mouth the way she twisted it. She didn't say a thing and just waddled away back to her desk, absolutely furious. 15 minutes later, I stood up and loudly announced my departure and that if anyone needed me, I'd be at home taking a nap. Am I the jerk? I mean, I'll be honest, you don't come across as a wonderful person in that story, author. Granted, she doesn't seem like one either, but you could have started building the bridge if you wanted to. Regardless, even if you weren't willing to do a favor for her, you probably could have just said no, or if you wanted to be slightly mean, use the same excuse she used on you from the get-go, that you wanted to sleep a bit. I was waiting to be proven wrong when I immediately started judging you after reading the title, "Pregnant Coworker Gets Her Just Desserts," and although Jill comes across as a little apathetic, I'm not sure I'd call her refusal to cover shifts outright cruel. You did say it was a refusal to cover when your brother was having emergency surgery, but I'll be honest, a lot of workplaces in situations like this would just let their employees go and work short-handed in really rough cases where there were no replacement volunteers. It sucks for everyone else working, but it's a solution. And from the limited information we have on what your office does, I don't see any reasons not to be able to let an employee go early from time to time. So yeah, some of you might think that I'm just being my usual anti-corporation bleeding heart self, but I say this sounds much more like a crappy boss problem than it is a Jill or author problem. Hard to tell without more information though. Oh, you know the owner? Well, that changes everything. I worked in a medium-sized video store chain for about a decade. I worked as everything from clerk to manager and district manager in that time. I've always hated customers. Hiding that fact was always a challenge. One day we had a customer that was upset that we'd charged his credit card over $100. We did this because he had rented 3 Sony PlayStation games for his kid. Our games had these CD Shield protective stickers that were stuck to the back and impossible to take off without destroying the game. His kid had tried to peel them off and killed 3 fairly new games. The mum came in and claimed that they didn't work and wanted to exchange them. The clerk had told her what her son had done to the games and that she was now responsible for the replacement of the games her son had ruined. When my employee told her how much it would cost to replace them, she said, "Good luck with that," and walked out. When I came in later that day, my employee showed me the games and told me what happened. I called the house and got the father. I explained what had happened and that I could probably cut him a little bit of slack on the replacement cost. His response, "F you, I'm not paying for anything." And he hung up, so I just charged his credit card, the one that he must have forgotten we kept on file. A few weeks later, I guess he got the credit card bill in the mail and came down to the store to yell at me. I tried to tell him that if he could go find replacements at a used game store cheaper, I'd refund the full price we had charged him. He started off with the "I'll sue you," and then went to the "I'll report you to the Better Business Bureau," to "I'll report you to the State Attorney General." When he realized I wasn't intimidated by his threats, he very smugly said this to me: "I know the owner, and you're screwed because of how you've treated me. When I tell him you'll be fired so quick it'll make your head spin." I stared at him in disbelief and then said, "You know David?" "Yeah, I know David. You're so screwed. The owner's name is actually Pete. That's what I meant. Actually, his name is Jack." F you." He crumbled up his credit card bill, tossed it at me, and stormed out. He did fight the charges. After some paperwork and faxing a copy of his signed rental agreement, complete with his authorization for us to charge him if he damaged the rental property, he was left with no other options. Gosh, I love this kind of thing. I wish I were ever this smooth and quick on my feet. I think anyone who's ever worked in retail or hospitality has dreamed of the perfect customer with that combination of no moral ground to stand on and nothing to back up their absurd entitlement. And when they do come along, most of us just crumple in front of the assault, sadly. But you came out of this one on top. I must say, from a lot of the comments, it seems like people claiming that they know the owner or manager is, or at least used to be, a fairly regular thing. And of all the awful crap that I used to put up with in my old jobs, that's one that never really seemed to come up to me. One of the commenters pointed out that if you weren't really sure, the other thing you could do was just hand the customer the store phone and ask if they'd like to call the manager since they're such good friends, and that usually called the bluff. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories.
Give me what I'm entitled to.
Background: I work in a supermarket. I've been there for nearly 7 years and I've run out of any fricks I previously had when I began. Today was slightly different. Prepare for a long, wild ride. I was hanging out packing bags for a coworker, anything to get out of doing real work, when the customer pointed at the screen and abruptly said, "That's wrong." "Oh, I'm sorry, what's wrong?"
"The salad tubs. They should be 2 for $7.
I go and check out the deli sign and realize she's got one classic tub for $4 and one gourmet for $5. The special is only for the classic tubs. The sign very clearly states that under the classic heading. There's no mention of any special rule under the gourmet heading, so I grab the sign and head back over to the register. I say, "Sorry, look, you've grabbed one of each, it's only the classic tubs that are on sale. Would you like me to get you another classic tub?"
"That's wrong. That's false advertising. If it's written on the sign, it means all of them."
"Oh, well, sorry, that's not how this works."
"You have to give it to me for $7. Your attitude is appalling."
I can't mark stuff down without asking the night manager.
"Call him down here now."
So I give him a call, he's busy, he asks what the go is, I explain and, "Oh, just give it to her for $7.
"What? No. Get screwed. No."
I can't, yet totally can, believe that this is happening to me. I take a deep breath, turn around and smile. I've spoken to him and he says today we'll reduce the price for you. It isn't reducing the price, it's giving me what I'm entitled to. Coworker changes the prices, she slams her card into the machine, and the transaction doesn't process because she's put in the wrong PIN. My coworker says, "Oh, sorry, you put in the wrong PIN. Can you try that again, please?" "Stop sabotaging my finances. What's your name? Mark? Mark, you'll be hearing from me." Holy fricking Christ on a bike. She finally leaves and I'm shaking because I really don't deal well with people shouting at me. But the next customer is lovely and we all relax and it's going to be alright. Nope. Half an hour later, the store manager calls me from upstairs. "Yolanda, what did you and Mark do? I've never had a customer yell so loudly about how bad the staff are." I explained the situation. "No, you know better. Customer is always right. If they're going to be like that, give them what they want and move on. Their happiness is more important than yours." I hung up the phone, look at Mark, and burst into tears. I haven't cried for years at this job. I'm so ashamed. People are looking at me, so I just mumble, "Back in a minute." I walk outside and just let rip for about 5 minutes. I do feel bad for leaving Mark on register alone, so I fix my makeup and go back inside. The rest of the shift passes, a man steals $100 of meat, kids are caught stuffing chocolate down their pants, Mark makes me laugh, and just before I leave, the night manager pulls me aside and repeats exactly what he said earlier. I smile, nod, leave, call my boyfriend, rent forever, come home, and now I'm writing this. I really wish the end of this massive post was, "And that's the story of why I quit my job," but today is not that day. Instead, I'm just going to eat some pizza pockets, play Mario Kart, and fantasize about the day I do quit. And obviously, names have been changed to protect me and my work pal. Sheesh. Well, folks, we've had some stories where these absolute jerks get their just desserts, and now we have this. Most of the time, working in food service just sucks, doesn't it? For every guy who manages to delightfully troll an entitled butthead about the name of the owner or manager, there are 10 appalling customers who make your life absolute hell, and management will just stand back and side with them most of the time. It sucks, but this is why we get out of that business if we can. Or we eventually run our own small shops, cafes, and delis, and stick up for our staff members when these venomous old dinosaurs roam in, shrieking at the top of their lungs. Hope your life and work situation got better. We can only pray that this absolute monster eventually went on to be one of the many characters that eventually get karmic justice dealt out to them in the many other stories of evil Karens that we narrate here on the channel. I mean, how many of these people can there really be? A couple of them, statistically, might appear on the channel more than once in different stories. The same mean old reptile getting a well-earned knuckle sandwich from karma. Let's hope the customer from this story was one of them. The city needs to accommodate my kids' sleeping schedule. I read this open letter to City Council in a local newspaper a while ago, and it made me laugh and cringe, so I thought I'd share. It was a complaint from a father of a toddler girl. The gist of the letter was that when the garbage truck drove by his house in the morning, it woke up his daughter at 7, and she would be fuzzy. This was a huge problem because she actually didn't need to get up before 8, and now he had to get up an hour early to get himself ready before his kid woke up. My first thought when I read this was that if it wasn't the garbage truck, it would be something else. His neighbors, the birds on his yard, the sun. It also states in the article that the early pickup was temporary and due to the garbage men being fewer people at work at the time, so they wouldn't get exposed to you-know-what. But I guess, screw the pandemic, my little angel needs her beauty sleep. His suggestion was that City Council invested in some city planners to redraw the route that the garbage truck drove so it would hit his house at a later point than it did right now, so that it would match with his daughter's sleeping pattern. Also, isn't it common that kids wake up really early? Maybe he could get up and do some parenting instead of blaming it on everyone else. And the best part? You know how often this garbage truck drove past his house? Every other Tuesday. I thought it was really common that kids woke up super early, right? Maybe he could just get up and do some parenting instead of blaming it on everyone else. Jesus frickin' Christ, it's literally once every 14 days. Okay, update. They actually met with him and took up the proposal. But the article doesn't say anything about whether it was successful or not. I really, really hope it wasn't and he learned his lessons somehow. Am I the jerk for laughing at this guy who just wants an extra hour in bed? I mean, this is just a long laugh, right? I can't believe that the city reps actually met with Mr. Rearrange the city to better suit my particular needs. Now, obviously, the narrator doesn't have kids, but I can't imagine any parent I know even bothering to complain about this. And it comes every 2 weeks. Just wait till she's doing what all other kids do at the age of 7, and are downstairs watching Sesame Street or Bluey from 6 a.m. in the morning and torturing their siblings in the ad breaks. Enjoy your 7 a.m. sleep-ins while you can, suburban dad. I'm amazed somehow you've gotten her to the age of 7 and somehow reacquainted yourself with the idea that a full night's sleep is something you'll get all the time. Alright, so he's not really much of a jerk, just hilariously short-sighted and a little self-centered. Am I the jerk for demanding that my son take his daughter on his family trip to Disneyland? I got pregnant with my son Julius, 28, about a month after my 18th birthday. I tried to do my best for him and he got into a good engineering school, but at 19 he got his then girlfriend Isa pregnant, and they had Annabella together. I've been the one who's mostly raised her. Isa got deported, but they spend July together and FaceTime every night. Julius got married to his girlfriend Katya after graduation, and they have 2 wonderful boys together. Annabella lives with me and not with them. She does go to live with her mother and her family in Mexico for the month of July. While she loves it there with all of her aunts and uncles and cousins and would probably be okay with moving, her mother wants her to have a Canadian education. The thing is, Julius never spends any time with Annabella. He doesn't even call to say goodnight. But she loves him so much. It's like once a month, he'll show up with a box full of toys, spend a day with her, and then go back to his family. It hurts her so much that he doesn't spend time with her because he's her hero, and I'm just grandma. And no, he doesn't act this way because of his wife. Katya would love to have Annabella move in with them. She once brought up the idea and she went on about all the things they could do together. She'd love to be her stepmom, calls her princess, sweetie, and so many nice nicknames. The only reason they haven't done it is because Julius said she should stay with me. A few days ago, Julius told me that he and Katya were planning a trip to Disneyland in August. I told him that Annabella would be so excited and he should tell her on her birthday, and he just blankly told me she's not coming and the trip is for his boys. I made it clear to him that he needed to bring her on the trip, and he just called me a jerk, which he's never done before, for trying to control him, apparently. I admit that I was a bit controlling in my reaction, but I don't think I went that far. He's my son and he may be a grown-up now, but I still have to try and teach him to be better even if it's impossible now. Wow. Julius is a mega jerk dad. Imagine just bailing on your responsibilities like this and turfing the responsibility off onto the woman who raised you into the bargain. Like, it sounds like the guy has graduated from engineering school and can't be doing that badly for money if he's raising 2 kids and doing Disneyland trips from Canada. He has the resources. His wife likes and accepts Annabella. I get that maybe it's a little complicated for him emotionally to have her around, and that's just me giving him credit that maybe he's more complex than he comes across in the story. If it's not that, then somehow he just doesn't care about his own flesh and blood at all, which is even more heartbreaking, especially given that she seems to idolize him and want his love. A couple of just sad stories in this video, I guess, folks. We're being reminded that most of the jerk encounters in the world don't end with high-five moments where they get owned by a protagonist. Most of them are just jerks. We'll finish this video with some escapism, though. Put my food in this bag right now. About a decade ago, I was in a McDonald's. I'd ordered and paid and was just waiting for my food near the pickup counter. In walked a man with a serious case of main character syndrome. He placed his order, then stood directly against the pickup counter. Shortly after, my food came out, and yes, they called out my order number. He quickly snatched it up, then looked in the bag and noticed it wasn't the right food for him. Since there was no chance he could have made a mistake, he started to complain. Yelling that they gave him the wrong food, he insisted they put his food in the bag right away. And with the joy of people who don't get paid enough for this crap, they gladly obliged. Taking the bag back, they quickly piled all his food on top of mine. The toxic levels of smug emanating from the man dissipated as the employee turned and handed me the bag. They say to him, "I'm sorry, sir, this bag wasn't your order. It was his," meaning me. "Your order will now just be a few more minutes as we need to remake it." Since I already had what I wanted, I gave the extra to someone else. Okay, thank you. I needed this after a few stories of the villains of life getting away scot-free. Not that it hasn't been good for us to be reminded that most of the time they go unpunished, but it's nice to finish on a story where a blustering, selfish old fool actually gets what they deserve. Also, I kind of love how little of a crap that the fast food staff gave in this. Just piling on a whole bunch of extra food on top of a random guy's and handing it out to him. I have to guess that the manager was on their break for that. We'd have never gotten away with that in my days of slaving under the golden arches. Absolute legends. Thanks for punishing that guy on your downtime. My boyfriend secretly moved his family into my house and thought I wouldn't find out. For context, I, a 28-year-old female, inherited a holiday home from my grandma some time ago. I never really use it as it's roughly a 5-hour drive out from London where I live. It's relevant to the story that the keys to the holiday home are on a rack with literally every other key to anything my boyfriend or I own. The holiday house has a security system hooked up to my phone, and when it detects someone on the property, the cameras turn on and I can see them. My boyfriend's brother, who's 33, recently had his 4th child. Him and his wife currently live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So 3 days ago, they were both over at mine and my boyfriend's house with all their kids. We were talking about anything and everything. I was holding the baby. My boyfriend's brother eventually mentioned how I have my holiday home and how it has more than enough space for him and his wife to raise their 4 kids. My exact response was, "Yeah, but I'm not going to let you live there, so..." And he went quiet after that, and his wife started to collect their kids and their things. They left about 10 minutes after. My boyfriend hasn't said anything to me about the conversation, yet I'm feeling bad about my response because I know that they really do need the space. So fast forward to yesterday. I wake up for work and realize my boyfriend isn't in bed with me. Nothing out of the ordinary. He works from 8:30 a.m. When I'm finally about to walk out the door, I go to grab my keys and I notice that my holiday home's keys are gone. I look around for them and I can't find them, so I call my boyfriend. The first time, he doesn't answer. The second time, he doesn't answer. Third time, he does. The conversation went, "Hey, have you seen my other house's keys?" Yeah, I have them." "Cool, why have you got them, though?" "I grabbed them by accident. I'll return them when I'm back from work." I thought everything would be fine, so I continued with my day and went on to work. Midway through my workday, I get a notification from the house's security system. I open it and find my boyfriend, his brother, and his family all outside the door with a moving van in the back. I was fuming. When I got home, my boyfriend was already there, acting as if everything was normal. I started screaming at him, asking why the heck he'd move a family into my house without my permission. He tried to justify it and said he had to help his family. It honestly just made me even more angry. I told him that we were over. He had one day to get his brother and his family out of my house or I'd call the police on them all for trespassing. So that all happened at around 6 yesterday, about 14 hours ago. He hasn't called me or anything, but I fully intend to go through with my threat. But I know they're really struggling right now. So update. By searching through the UK government's website, I've managed to figure out what I can legally do. I've also called the police on them already. I haven't received any updates on that yet, but I'll share them when I can. Okay, another update. I called the police a small while ago. About 30 minutes ago, they came and returned my keys and let me know that the family have been told to leave by the cops. At first, they refused, but eventually they packed up their things and went. My ex-boyfriend, his brother, and his brother's wife have been blowing up my phone asking me why the heck I'd put them and their children through this. I've blocked them all. I feel absolutely terrible about what I did, and I know there was probably a better way to handle the situation. I even considered letting them stay there after all, but I'm not sure they'd pay rent or anything. For the future, I plan to rent the home out, as many of you suggested, but I'm not sure how ex-boyfriend's family would take that. I've had better security systems installed on the house and locks changed. Thank you to everyone who gave me advice at the time, it helped me get through it mentally. So, would I be the jerk for calling the cops? Alright, well, it's a bit harsh on your end, but ultimately it is your property and they all plotted together to deceive and leech off of you without your permission. That's not an environment of trust, and even though I think it was fair of them to ask, it was absolutely within your right to say no. And you're absolutely right to dump your partner for going through such an elaborate deception, despite living with you and likely having plans of deepening your relationship in the future. I can also understand feeling terrible about turfing them out on their butts. A family of 6 is a lot to tip out of a home. But they shouldn't have put you in that position to begin with. Honestly, the fact that they dropped the conversation after one try means that they likely knew that their brother's girlfriend was a bit of a tenuous connection to just go seeking full-time free room and board from. Maybe he can move in with them, and together with their combined incomes, they can get something better, since he's clearly so willing to go above and beyond for them. So yeah, it does feel a little bad talking about displacing a family with 4 small children under the circumstances, and the narrator is likely enough of a pushover that he might have said yes to their first request, even if he didn't want to. I'm just saying that the author was definitely well within her right to say no. Cops called after already being served. So a bit of background, as it'll help to understand. I just turned 19 a couple of months back, and it was just the end of finals for uni. It's safe to say that I've had a stressed month, and I just wanted to go out for a couple of beers with my friends. Now, normally we'd just go to the campus pub since it was just after our last final for social work, but we decided to switch it up a bit. So we sit down after getting off the bus and finding a decent bar with some Good Friday deals. We're already a couple of beers in, and I was kind of surprised that I haven't been asked to see my ID, as I look a lot younger than I am. But I wasn't worrying about it. Then the bartender noticed where the beers were going. It's important to note before I go on that our provincial licensing agency had just switched up the way our licenses look, and our secondary photo was no longer see-through, but now had a little scratchy holographic part on the bottom right-hand corner. The bartender said to me, "Hey, can I see your ID for a moment?" And me, thinking nothing of it, handed it over casually as I took a drink, and said, "Of course." The bartender looks over it closely, and I should mention that it's a valid government-issued driver's license, and I'd just renewed it on my birthday, as per provincial standards. "Do you have another piece of ID that I could see?" At this point, my friends had gone quiet and stopped the conversation completely. They didn't actually say anything during this encounter. I said, "No, my driver's license is the only ID that I actually carry on me." He went quiet as he left my ID on the counter and just went into the back. I already had an idea as to what he was doing, so we started to gather our things and finish our drinks, since we'd already paid for them. No tabs were allowed on the weekend without a credit card. We did take our time, yes, but we were all curious as to how this would play out. About 10 minutes passed, and the next thing we knew, the cops were inside the bar. We just rolled our eyes at each other as the bartender came up to the table with them. I can't remember what exactly was said, but pretty much the bartender thought my ID was a fake and decided to call the cops on me. After I sat in the back of a car for a bit and my friends were told to go home, I was finally let go almost an hour later after they verified everything was real. What annoyed me the most was the fact that I'd already been served 3 drinks at the time, and they didn't bother to ID me before that. So instead, they tried to cover their butts and say my ID was fake to avoid the fine, as it's supposed to be, "Look under 25, expect to be carded." In short, bartender IDs me after I'm 3 beers in, then decides to call the cops and claim my ID is a fake since he's never seen the changes to the ID in order for him to avoid a fine against the bar. I have my liquor license now and I'm a bartender on weekends, and the way it was all handled was just sketchy in itself. And you can bet that I ratted the bartender out for serving me before seeing my ID. The bar is still up and running as I went to visit my uni city this past weekend, although apparently it's run by different owners now. Am I the jerk for ratting them out after what they did to me? Yeah, this is all a big no-no. Personally, I wouldn't have bothered, but I can totally understand that you wanted a bit of payback, and honestly, if they're behaving that shiftily all the time, maybe they need some retraining on how to serve beverages and the proper current forms of ID. Probably a little embarrassing for them that they demonstrably couldn't identify a modernized ID from you to begin with. Well, the important thing is that that bartender is probably no longer serving, at least in that establishment. This all feels a little low stakes to me, like they clearly did realize that they'd maybe screwed up and tried to carry out a fix of sorts, but it's all just sort of botched. To be kept in hindsight for the other side, if the author and her friends looked like they were leaving, maybe just let them go and pray the cops don't show up and ID them next time. It honestly seems like a panicked reaction though, so I can't judge too harsh. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Tell me to cover up in my own yard? Be beholden to my thighs every summer. So this is more of an annual revenge thing. About 5 years ago, a greedy councilman put up 3 two-story apartments next to our house. One of these has a direct view of our pool area, and a grouchy woman and her husband moved into it. Anywho, as we've done in the 15 summers before they got there, we all went for an afternoon swim. The woman was on her balcony and made a huge dramatic fuss about going back inside and closing her curtains. She then screeched at her husband when he tried to go outside. It's not like we were indecent or anything, just in our swimsuits. We laughed about it and continued having a nice afternoon at the pool while she roasted inside. A few days went by and I decided it was too hot to be inside and went for a dip. I was in the middle of uni and this was the only time I'd leave the house between assignments and tests. Now, I don't have a body that stops traffic. I'm a regular, plump human whose Dorito-loving habits have begun to show around the lower body area. I take off my sarong and jump into the pool. After a few minutes, I sense someone watching me. I look up and find a man on my balcony smoking and staring right at me. I make a bit of an aggressive, "What?" gesture, and he scurries back inside, only to return with the woman in tow. The conversation went something along the lines of, "Excuse me, could you not swim when my son is out here smoking? He lost his job and this is the time he'd normally smoke, and you're out here exposed and distracting him." Ugh, he's the age of my dad. He can smoke on your front balcony. And I've lived here for, at the time, 15 years, so you can't blame me for being here exposed, which I'm not, by the way, I'm swimming. "I'm just asking you to be considerate, okay?" At this point, the grown man baby was just looking smug. And I said, "If you don't like it, then move." So I continued swimming. They stood there for another 5 minutes before once again going inside and closing the sliding patio doors and curtains. Also, I wasn't exposed or indecent. I wear full swimsuits because I'm a little insecure about my belly. See what I said about the Doritos for reference. I told my parents, and the next day my mum joined me in the pool to show them, and I quote, "What real traumatizing thighs look like." But that got me thinking though. I could make their summers a living hell if closing all their curtains was how they went about seeing us in the pool. So now, every summer, weather permitting, I go out and flash my thighs for a few hours in the afternoon and have them roast up in their apartment. It's been 5 years of this, and I'll continue doing it until the day I leave home. It did get to me at first, but then I realized what perverts they were for watching me swim. I live in South Africa. If they called the police, the officers would proceed to laugh at them and tell them where to get off. I should start skinny dipping again in that case. As a late update, I want to thank everyone who's giving me ideas to be even more petty. My mum and I are getting a good chuckle out of it, and I'm now on Amazon looking for the hairy dude swimsuit. There are also some great suggestions about getting every male in my family a Borat-style mankini in fluorescent green. I think they'd all be down for this. Maybe I could start off with my cousins and brother and then bring in my uncles for an end-of-season fiesta. Also, everyone's been so wholesome about this. My Dorito thighs give thanks for the acceptance. As long as they're there, I'll torture them. This is my villain origin story, and I can't go back on it now. Excellent. What hyper-moral cult did these weirdos spring from, in that swimming in the pool that you own in anything less than a full robe wasn't to be expected? Also, the fact that you saw the quote, "son," and thought he was her husband is not a flattering image of him, although I suppose we can hardly criticize them for their looks. The narrator said, recording that thought anyway. Honestly, this is right up there with any number of weirdos who are somehow averse to the natural shapes of other people, particularly women. If you can't see women in bathing suits without your mortal soul spontaneously plummeting into the deepest depths of depravity, that says a lot more about you than it does about the ladies who honestly just want to cool off in the pool. I'm completely on board with you going above and beyond to flaunt what you got even more now that they've revealed their squirmish position on the matter. And I dearly hope that you can actually get your wacky costume ideas together. And please tell us about it here on the channel too. We all dearly want to hear how these Puritan souls react to the parade of horrors unfolding outside their balcony. The worst human I've ever met. So, this happened yesterday. I'm not working at the moment, but I've been trying to keep myself busy by offering help to the people in my family and friend circles, giving them lifts, helping them move, among other things. All in all, I consider myself a pretty generous person. Yesterday, my younger brother finally managed to get a few days off work, and he was going up the coast with some friends for a nice relaxing getaway for one of their birthdays. He asked me weeks before if I could give him a lift, as he had chef school that day and wouldn't be able to get a lift to the house with his friends as planned. I said, sure, no problems. The day comes around and I pick him up early as he finished quickly, and we got on our way. The drive wasn't bad, it took about 1.5 hours, and we just chatted and listened to music all the way there. It was a nice drive. At this point, it was around 4:30 p.m. by the time I dropped him off and turned around to go home. I got probably halfway home and I saw someone parked up by the side of the road, waving me down. So I decided to pull over as a few cars ahead had already driven past without stopping. And they dodged a bullet. Enter the entitled parent and her piece of crap kid. Entitled parent, a woman, looks at me and says, "Can I help you?" I looked confused as she had waved me down. I thought you maybe needed some help. Is everything okay? No. We ran out of petrol. Oh, okay. That's a pretty easy fix. The next town I knew had a service station as I passed it on the way there, and it was only another 5 kilometers up the road. I said, I can drive you into the town to get petrol and bring you back here. Okay, she says simply, while her son was picking up some gravel by the roadside and throwing it into traffic on a 60-mile-per-hour highway. I said, hey, don't do that, champ, that's dangerous. And she'd got to her car to grab her purse, but reeled out of it as I said that. Don't you dare speak to my son like that, she snapped angrily. I said, sorry? I got into my car, followed quickly by the obnoxious pair, highly regretting my life choices by this point, now feeling that I can't redouble on myself given how difficult she's been at me helping her. She sits down and immediately scoffs, looking at her feet. Why is your car so dirty? Oh, sorry, I used to put my work boots down there, so it kind of got dirty over time. You know, you could clean it up. I laughed nervously and just nodded, pulling away and wanting this to be over as fast as possible. I left my phone in the center console and she grabs it. Can I call someone? My phone ran out of charge and that's why we were stuck out there. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I have unlimited calls, so I didn't really care. Either she thinks the person on the other line can't hear her, or she's trying to contact them without the use of the phone because she is shouting. Meanwhile, her son was leaping up between the 2 front seats, looking out the front window. I quickly slowed down in a bit of a shock. Whoa, put your seatbelt on, dude. The mother just glances at him and pushes him onto the back seat, and I have to tell him to put on his seatbelt again before he actually does. I'm freaking seething by this point, but I could already see the town ahead and she had thankfully only had a short conversation and put my phone back. We pulled up to the pump without issue, but she sits there for about 10 seconds giving me this quick sideways glance with her arms folded. And I didn't even have to ask if this B-word wanted me to go and get the gas for her. I knew she did. And then I didn't know if it was going to work, but I wanted to try and here I am. I got out of the car and grabbed a 5-liter jerry can they had for sale, holding it up for her approval, and she nods. I fill it up and walk up to the passenger side door and open it. She says, "What?" "Oh, I just wanted to know if your son wanted to pick out an ice cream. I know it's hot today." She looked shocked for a moment, and for the first damn time, she smiled. The kid practically leapt out of the car, and much to my happiness, so did she and followed him in there. I walked in, put the jerry can onto the counter as he quickly comes up with his ice cream. Then I said, "Oh, 1 second, I left my phone in the car. It has my debit card in it." I smile as soon as my back was turned to them, got into the car and casually drove off, relishing in the sight of her running out of the service station, screaming who knows what profanities. All in all, it only ended up costing me about 20 minutes of my time, but the feeling I got as I drove away was priceless. I wonder how long it took them to get back to their car. I got home fine, with a solid gold story in tow to tell my family. Best drive ever. I only hope the poor guy running the servo didn't cop it too badly from that crapstorm of a human. This is truly majestic. And once again, you are a bit of a jerk in this one instance, but honestly, as long as you're inflicting it on specimens like her, I really don't mind. And it seems like you'd built up a fair bit of good karma by driving your friends and family around, so maybe you were due a bit of satisfaction. My only point of contention is that you screwed the kid a bit too, and it sounds like he didn't have a great role model or anything. And as usual, I'll tend to hold them off on any blame until they've hit adulthood. But back to the main villain of our story. What the frick was going on in this lady's head that she seemed so comfortable and unapologetic with just expecting everything from this Good Samaritan as if it were Her Majesty's proper due? At least have some shame to pretend you left your wallet in the car. Was this a grift? Is this how this woman moves from town to town in order to concoct schemes to mooch off locals and trick restaurants into giving her free food with Karen-like claims of outrage over service and meals? We can only send our thoughts and prayers to the gas station attendant that the author abandoned her with. We hope you called the cops when she inevitably made all of this your problem. Thanks for watching, folks. My mum cancelled my birthday and gave my sister 2 birthday parties instead, just to punish me. This happened in 1998 when I was 8 years old and my sister was 5. From a very early age, I knew that my younger sister was the golden child and could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. Mother Dearest was horrible towards me for most of my childhood until I was 14 and her physical and mental treatment of me turned towards my sister as well. My parents had separated before my sister was born. They didn't mesh well together but tolerated each other for the sake of their kids. Part of the reason that my sister was my mum's favourite child was her love for horse riding, which I was never interested in. The more hostile our mother got towards me, the less interested I got in anything she was interested in. And then came my 8th birthday. I was friends with our next-door neighbour's kids and a few kids from school. Although I didn't have that many, I loved the friends I did have and was excited to share my birthday with them. My birthday was on a Friday, but my mum told me that she'd arrange my birthday party for the Saturday, which was fine by me. The day of my birthday party came and I got excited. At that age, I hadn't yet had my heart crushed by my mother and her blatant favoritism and abuse. But that was the year I began to hate my birthday. The party was arranged to start at 12 p.m., so I wore my favorite dress and sat outside to wait for my friends to arrive. This was the point that I realized something wasn't right. Outside was the mother of one of my sister's friends with a Shetland pony in tow. My mother knew I wasn't interested in horses, and even if I was, this horse was too small for an 8-year-old. As more guests started to arrive, my heart broke more and more. These were my sister's friends, not mine. And for the icing on the cake, out came my 5-year-old sister in a Cinderella costume. None of these people were there for me. This was supposed to be my party, but instead it became a party for my sister. None of my friends were there. All of the birthday presents were addressed to me, but were things I didn't want. My Little Pony toys and other horse-related gifts were what I got from my mother and the people at the party. The only present that I got that wasn't horse-related was from our dad. He came later in the day to wish me a happy birthday, and by that point the other guests and the pony were gone. I can remember him asking me what was wrong, as I wouldn't come out of my room or talk to anyone. My mother acted dumb and said that she didn't know why I was upset. It wasn't until many years later that my dad found out what happened. They weren't talking by then and I'd moved away to live with my dad. I don't think he talked to her about it. He knew what she was like, which is probably why they separated. And that's not even the worst thing she's ever done, and it isn't even the reason I don't talk to her anymore. Anyway, after that day, I didn't want a birthday party again. In future celebrations, whenever she'd give presents to me, it would be something that she wanted and I didn't, and she'd give a present to my sister, as well as one for me when it was my birthday, because my sister would throw a fit if she didn't get something. Even now at 30, I don't make a big deal out of my birthday. I still celebrate it, but I don't do birthday parties. My sister has changed a lot since then, and I don't hold any grudges for the things our mother did. We don't speak to our mother anymore, and our father died in 2009, when I was 19. It's tough sometimes, but me and my sister are really close, so we have each other to lean on for support. I'd be lost if it weren't for her. My life is going great now. I turned 30 a few months ago, and I had a hysterectomy 2 weeks ago. My choice. So I'll never have my own kids. Her bad parenting made me not want to repeat her mistakes. Not that I'm anything like her. Yep, some parents really don't deserve kids, and this mother is a shining example of why that is. Actively punishing someone for not aligning their interests with yours and showing such blatant favoritism is just absolutely reprehensible. This is another one of the cases where you have to wonder how they justified what they were doing to themselves and managed to come away with the idea that they were doing parenting right somehow. And the fact that she turned on your sister as soon as she showed any signs of individualism tells us everything we need to know. The whole show was always going to be about your mother. Anyone who took away from that or didn't try to mimic her was a problem that needed to be bullied and beaten down for it. I'm glad that the author and her sister managed to reconcile fairly easily. It would have been a shame if that narcissistic monster was the reason they never communicated again. A lot of lesser people might have blamed the sister for her actions, but it sounds like she was a very small child at the time, and like she came to her senses pretty quickly afterwards. Good on both of you. If you never want to see your mother again, it's completely justified. I've been told you'd like to hear about my grandmother. My grandmother got married in 1962 to a young man in the military. For a wedding present, their parents brought them a house in a nice suburb. White picket fence, the whole 9 yards. Not long after they moved in, the next-door neighbor planted a mulberry tree on the side of his property, near my grandparents' driveway. Nothing seemed amiss, but if you know mulberry trees, you know that crap is about to get real. About 15 years later, the mulberry tree was obnoxious. The birds would come and eat the berries, and any car parked in the driveway would get crapped on, and it would stain the cars and ruin paint jobs. My grandmother, upon realizing the culprit, baked a nice apple pie, walked next door, and asked the neighbor if he'd mind trimming back the hedges of the tree that hung over her driveway. He told her not to worry, he'd get to it soon. 3 days later, my grandmother opened her door to find a half-eaten pie in the plate, crawling with ants, and a note that said, "I changed my mind." My grandmother threw out the pie, cursing up a storm and swearing up and down she'd get him to trim that tree or get him back. City ordinance said she couldn't trim the tree as the roots were on his property, so the whole tree was his property. As the years went by, my grandmother repeatedly asked him ever so nicely to trim it back. His responses were always along the lines of no and F off. Finally, in the mid-90s, my grandmother retired and received a large bonus from her employer for her 35 years of work. She took the money and brought the empty lot on the other side of the neighbor, then went to a nursery and brought 16 mulberry trees, planting them along her property line, on both sides of his property. About 3 years ago, he became angry at the damage they were doing to his cars, and he cut them all back without permission. My grandmother took him to court, and he was forced to reimburse her for the trees at a markup because they'd had 10 years to grow. Wow, Grandma plays the long game, I guess. To be fair to her, this guy just seems unpleasant in the extreme. Like, just saying no because you can't be bothered is one thing, but the whole gesture with the half-eaten pie and his open disregard is just nasty. I get that neighbors can seem annoying when they're asking you to do stuff like this, but he obviously was a huge hypocrite, as he immediately busted out the saw and shears when the same inconvenience was placed upon him. I was thinking that your grandma was spending way too much of her money on this revenge, but given how lawsuits in the US seem to go, I guess she might have gotten a fair bit, if not all of her money back. I don't know the maximum amount you can get fined for attacking a tree over there, probably surprisingly big from what I've seen before. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Random mother is very entitled and believes she has the authority to check my ID and stop me from leaving a store. I've just started university in Swansea, Wales in the UK. I live and grew up in London, England, and we don't get many Karens in the UK, especially in London, because people just don't have time for that crap. That being said, I would have expected for it to be more likely to have this interaction in London as opposed to Swansea. When I came here, I assumed that being a predominantly white area, I'd encounter some racism, being of South Asian descent with brown skin. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that everyone was really nice and helpful and much more welcoming than in London. There was one incident, though, in a Beefeater restaurant, which is like a weird restaurant with a pub and bar attached to a 3-star hotel in the UK, and everyone there was staring at me as I moved about, and I definitely felt the xenophobic vibes. But anyway, this story, I was at the big Tesco in town. It's a supermarket chain. The company owned Fresh and Easy in the US. And I'm buying some food and homewares like frying pans and stuff like that. I'm buying a load of alcohol for the flat. I'm talking 2 bottles of Baileys, large bottles of vodka and white rum, Disaronno, an 18-pack of Corona, Jägermeister, as well as Coke, Red Bull, and soda water. It's not enough to fill a bar, but still a fair bit for one person to buy. As I'm paying at the checkout, I have my driving license as ID to show the cashier. I'm 19, yet I have a pretty babyish face and I'm pretty small, so I always expect to get ID'd. But for some reason, the guy doesn't ask to see my ID, and I pay and start loading my shopping back onto my trolley. As I'm doing so, the woman behind me with her teenager, maybe 15 to 17 years old, starts speaking to the cashier. She was English, not Welsh, and the tone of her voice told me everything I needed to know immediately, i.e., Karen alert. She started whining and scolding him, asking why he didn't check my ID. The young cashier also seemed to realize this wasn't going to be a fun interaction and responded saying that I've shopped here before and he knows that I'm of age. I don't know if it was bullcrap or not though, because I don't recall seeing him before. The woman continues to berate him, telling him that it sets a bad example to her kid because it shows him that he can get away with buying drinks underage and using fake IDs. If you see a situation like that, just teach your son not to do that. Don't come at me when you don't know facts. So yeah, at this point I'm done loading my shopping and decide not to engage and leave. She instantly forgets the cashier and blocks my way, asking me to show her my ID and my bank card. I politely tell her she has no right and she then loses her crap. She doesn't scream or raise her voice significantly, but her tone becomes incredibly aggressive, and she starts pointing her finger at me and accusing me of buying alcohol while underage. I tell her I am of age and have every right to purchase what I just did, and if she has an issue, she can go find the manager because she, a fellow customer in the store, has no jurisdiction over me. The cashier himself decides to call for a manager and apologizes to me. I notice the kid now, and he gives me a stern look, but I'm pretty sure it was just to side with his mum, and that he was also uncomfortable about the whole ordeal. The manager comes over and asks the cashier what's wrong, and lo and behold, the unbearable witch interrupts the lad and starts berating the manager. The manager listens a little, stops her for a sec, and turns to me and asks for ID. I give it to him, he checks it, and he's happy. But as soon as he goes to hand it back, the woman snaps at him with an expectant look on her face and says something like, "Sorry, but I'd like to check it myself." Not even a please. He gives it back to me anyway, which triggers a visible storm of anger within her, and she then proceeds to block his way and starts scolding him about poor customer service, illegal business activity, among other things. The cashier tells me to leave, and I do so because it's 9 p.m., and I really can't be effed to deal with this. I hope that woman was kicked out or something, and if so, I'm sad I didn't witness it, but dear God, I feel sorry for that poor kid. Yeah, I was racking my brain throughout this. Karens may not be exclusive to America, but it does certainly seem to be a thing that happens more there, at least for the majority of stories we receive here on the channel. But depending on which particular English accent this specimen had, I can really imagine that it added to the experience. I mean, if someone had a posh BBC British accent, it would really up the entitlement by several degrees. But anyway, I don't know where this woman got off. Caring that much about whether someone you saw in a store was or wasn't of age might be considered a public concern thing, but she just had to go and keep it going so long after it was clear that even the manager was satisfied that you weren't buying booze illegally. At that point, you've just got to get a life for yourself, British Karen. God, imagine being her kid and having this happen anytime anything looked so much as a hair out of line. Sucks to be you, kid. Best of luck. I do work here, hand over the remote control. It was 1997 and the Red Wings were in the playoffs for the first time in 42 years. We just installed widescreen TVs in the restaurant just for that purpose. Customers were packed in wearing jerseys of our favorite players, with the exception of a group of 4 women who stopped in to eat after what looked like a raid on Kmart. Bags blocked the aisles and servers had a difficult time moving around them. The waitstaff wore their favorite jerseys over their work shirts. Signage was everywhere promoting the playoffs being shown inside. Red Wing decor plastered the walls. Time came for the local show talking about how the city of Detroit was hyped because it was 42 years since Detroit had been in the playoffs. I grabbed the remote and changed all of the TVs to the channel. There came a loud rumble of disapproval from the foretop of Karens. One Karen came up to me and with a voice like nails against a chalkboard, mixed with balloons being rubbed together, said, "Excuse me, we were watching that," and snagged the remote out of my hand, returning the channel they were watching. The patrons who were there for the game let out an even louder shout of, "Hey, guys, what the frick? What's going on?" I said, well, customers shouldn't just be able to change the channel anytime they want, and I took the remote back and flipped it back to the pre-game show. Look, lady, we've been waiting all day for this. It's the playoffs. It's what we're all here for. And the Karen snatched the remote back and went to change the channel again. Lady, give me the remote now, and I wrangled it away from her. The patrons were getting very antsy and upset, and the voices of anger grew louder. The Karen grabbed a server and told him to get someone in charge. He looked at me speechlessly. Lady, I do work here. I'm in charge. I'm the manager.
No, you're not. You're wearing a stupid hockey shirt,
she said. Mom, take a look at the waitstaff. Look, we're all wearing hockey jerseys showing support. Mom, they're going to form a mob and I won't be able to stop them. Okay. How about this? I give you a free meal card next time you come in and have the remote too. Just get your stuff and go now, I pleaded.
Okay, but next time we come in, we want to speak to the manager.
Lady, I am the manager. Now go. Just go before they light torches. Karen looked around and finally saw the patrons staring at them like they were going to grab the 4 women by their Karen haircuts and drag them out. The Karens began to get nervous and left.
It's just a stupid game. What's the big deal?
And then they were out. I returned the televisions to the pre-game show with a loud sigh of relief. Yes, the Karens won this one with the free meal and the free meal they would have next time they came in. But I won by stopping a riot and an exodus of customers going to another restaurant or bar to watch the game. Yes, I lost to the Karens, but I won by keeping my butt from getting kicked by already liquored up mobs of hockey fans. They never did return, thank God. Even amongst our usual Karen suspects, this has a special kind of entitlement and lack of self-awareness. It's almost like some of them were thinking,
you know, just making the life of staff a misery isn't going to cut it for me today. I want something bigger. I want a little excitement, a little danger in my life. I know, let's turn off the game in a restaurant full of sports fans.
I don't know why my Karen voice is also my Gilbert Gottfried voice, by the way. I mean, what were they thinking? My jokes aside, the way the author describes it makes it seem like they honestly didn't know that they were angering a huge mob of Detroit sports fans who were especially invested in this particular game. The jaded former waiter in me kind of wonders what would have happened if that was the hill they decided to die on. Then again, they didn't even come in to exploit and exaggerate the free meal they were owed. So despite their hilarious selective blindness, maybe they weren't true Karens. It's up for debate. Am I the jerk for refusing to make my husband apologize for what he said to my mum at the dinner table? So I, a woman of 31 years, recently got married to my husband, Scott, who's 36. Before I met him, I was engaged to my former fiancé, Martin, but we broke it off because this relationship was sort of pushed by my family, because Martin was a doctor and came from a wealthy family. When our relationship ended, my mum was devastated. She did her best to bring us back together. For example, she lied to Martin about me being pregnant to, quote, save us. That was years ago, now we're all on good terms, including Martin. Mum has a bit of tension towards Scott, she treats him well, but constantly makes passive, nagging comments about him. She compares him to Martin all the time, which bothers both of us, but we try to let it slide. Mum kept telling Scott about the diamond ring, new car, and bank account that Martin got for his fiancée, and kept sending him photos saying how generous Martin is to his fiancée, then compared him to Scott and what he had done for me. I told her to stop doing this, and she apologized. Last week we were over at my parents' house for a social gathering with a lot of relatives coming, and we had dinner. At the dinner table, Mum asked Scott if she saw the text she'd sent him the other day. He said he was sorry and that he didn't notice. She told him to check it right then and read it out aloud so everyone at the table could hear. He took his phone and started reading the text out loud. Her text mentioned how Martin got his new fiancée a house and how generous he was, then said that Martin was younger than Scott yet able to buy a house, basically shaming Scott for his inability to buy a house. She wrapped up saying that Martin maybe wasn't so bad for me after all. I was shocked and Scott was obviously angry. However, he didn't lash out or anything like that. He looked at the text, smiled and said, "You know, what gets me about this entire text is how you were a public educator for 30 years. Yet you can't differentiate between the passive you and the contraction you're. Good God, the thought of all the children that must have been left behind. Everyone at the table busted into laughter, and my mum's face went pale. She decided to leave the table, and then she and my sister started yelling at me, saying Scott was being awfully rude, and I needed to get him to apologize immediately for embarrassing Mum at the table. I refused to tell him to apologize, then pointed out how she was being judgmental towards him. She defended herself, saying she was just letting him know, and he had no confidence and took it personally for some reason. I left, but I keep getting told to talk to him and get him to apologize for what he did. Jeepers creepers, there's so much to unpack here. I don't know how Scott puts up with this all the time. He must really like you, author. I've got to say, I don't know why you had to even ask if you were the jerk. Your mum does just come across as an absolute monster. I can't imagine why you keep putting up with her treating your husband this way for so long. That's the real question for me here. Still, Scott seems awesome and like he's more than capable of fighting his own battles, despite the crap he puts up with for the love of peace. Scott is a champ, support him more often.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.